If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to MINDSHOCK True Crime. You are listening to the Stephen Avery series. This is episode 33, Overdoses. We will be going over uncanny coincidences and anomalies between the main players in this case. And it is so beyond mind-shocking. I mean, we have left mind shocks all along the way in this series. We're now on episode 33, unbelievably. And we've just begun to scratch the surface of what goes down in Manitowoc County. These same individuals involved in all of these shady cases. Is it all coincidental? Now, the cognitive dissonant coincidence theorists, aka guilters, they have their heads stuck so far in the sand, they maintain everything is all legitimate. And all of these things are mere coincidences, despite the statistical chances that it's all mere coincidences rendered completely impossible. But coincidence theorists love their fairy tales. Because, of course, there can never be any corrupt individuals wearing government costumes. That's just an impossibility, right? Very, very silly indeed. But the mind shocks to come here surrounding drug issues, drug cases, are just beyond insane. If you haven't checked out the previous episodes in particularly, but basically the entire series, I will be referencing previous episodes. Remaker, doctors involved in the Carmen Bootwell fiasco, who again coincidentally just happens to look exactly like Teresa Halbach. And the coincidences are just beyond insane. Of course, we have Remaker, the one who technically worked the case on Carmen Bootwell's death. And ironically, Carmen Bootwell's mother is neighbors of the dispatch woman who Coburn called in the plates. Andy Coburn, of course, the one who was looking at Teresa Halbach's RAV4 license plate when he couldn't have been, and he shouldn't have been. And if you follow the case, you know that fiasco, among many fiascos, in what is basically a circus of an investigation where nothing is above board. As always, if you enjoyed the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications. Make sure you allow your device to have those notifications come through. Or you can just go to youtube.com/MindShock and manually check for updates and peruse our ever-growing back catalog. To keep awareness up in this case, these wrongful convictions of Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey, and to find truth and justice for the victims, of which, if Teresa Halbach is one of them, of course, that's one of the most controversial aspects of the case. Technically, there's no scientific evidence that stands up to any kind of logical scrutiny that Teresa Halbach is even dead. But if she is, she deserves justice, and these other individuals deserve justice as well. There's a lot of people apparently being murdered in Manitowoc County, and cover-ups galore, and this has been going on for many decades. If you haven't checked out the episode Coincidence County, I go over a plethora of cases with wrongful convictions, shady investigations, all circling around the same individuals, coincidentally. All, I'm sure, a mere coincidence, just like everything else in the case. Hit the like button, share it across social media platforms, of which you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. And you could also be a guest on the podcast, depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. So, there's, again, a lot of similar individuals circling all of these issues here. So just a quick recap here from the inspiringdad.com on Carmen Bootwell. A long and overdue Carmen Bootwell update. This is, okay, it's long overdue, and there is some misinformation that I need to correct, and I want to help put some of the rumors going around about Carmen to rest. I'm going to make it short and sweet. This past summer, I had the pleasure of speaking with Carmen's mom and brother a couple of times, and they offered a lot of information to me and a couple of other people who are researching the case. They spoke to us freely and didn't hold anything back, although I don't know how he would know that. They weren't even aware that Carmen's name was being discussed in different theories. They wanted to set the record straight, and I'm going to do that. I'm not going to give out a lot of information. Because it is personal, and I just want to set the record straight on some of the bigger misconceptions and rumors that are out there. I also don't want to jeopardize any investigations. Okay, 1. Carmen's mom and dad paid for her funeral and cremation. There were a lot of rumors going around saying that Manitowoc County paid for these services, but that is far from the truth. Carmen's dad did whatever he could to pay for his daughter's funeral. And I'm not sure exactly how accurate that is. So, depending on which reports you read, apparently Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office assisted the family with funeral arrangements. Now, exactly what that means is unknown. Like, what did they facilitate and how? So the family technically paid for Bootwell's funeral, but apparently Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office told the family they should have her cremated. This is really bizarre. They advised the family that an autopsy would be done immediately and that they would help with the arrangements for cremation. Arrangements. So they help with arrangements, whatever that means, financial or otherwise. So if it's not financial, or if it's under the table, or if it's some kind of hush money, how could this inspiring that individual or anybody take their words on blind faith? Now, again, I'm not saying they're lying. I'm saying if something shady is going on and money switched hands in a shady fashion, would people rush to disclose that? Either way, we have, of course, Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office employees involved with funeral homes, these same circle of individuals. So the Pfeffer Funeral Home and Cremation Care Center is assisting the family with funeral arrangements. So did this funeral home assist them in some capacity? Did they give them a break on prices and they did technically pay? How would all this done? Obviously, it wouldn't be done in a obviously, someone from Manitowoc isn't going to walk up to the door and give them an envelope full of cash. This would have to be done in a particular way. I mean, it's weird. The coincidence theorists claim that since it wasn't done all out in the open and reported, therefore it wasn't done. I mean, the cluelessness, it's incredible how some people do not understand that humans are capable of corruption. There are corrupt humans out there. Now, knowing which ones, of course, that's a separate matter. So this is, of course, the funeral home that's connected with Tom Kucerik, the sheriff at the time of Stephen Avery's original 1985 frame-up for the assault of Penny Bernston. Again, same individuals involved. So Carmen's funeral is on November 8th, then she's cremated, and then bones magically found on Avery's property November 8th. So the funeral was 1 p.m. on the 8th, the bones were found at 1:30 p.m. Sifting started 3 p.m. Avery's arrested the following day, November 9th. Teresa Halbach's death certificate, November 10th. Just a very, very interesting dates. Very, very interesting dates. The timeline here is just, I don't know what to make of it. It's just flat out mind-shocking. And then, of course, Carmen Bootwell apparently had a boyfriend or ex-boyfriend with connections to the DEA. This guy apparently escaped from jail at one point as well. And there were DEA connections with the bones being found with Jost on the Avery property. I mean, there's just too much insanity going on here. The coincidences are absolutely mind-shocking. And what's also interesting, apparently in the dispatch reports, Carmen Bootwell was found dead around 8 a.m. And then Andy Coburn was the one that was sent to investigate. And of course, there's no proper notes on anything ever involving Andy Coburn. Is he on vacation? Is he not on vacation? Did he have off? I mean, there's just no way to ever corroborate anything Andy Coburn is involved in. And the next call Coburn makes in these November 3rd calls is about the so-called suspect Zipper. And we'll be getting into some mind-shocking Zipper connections in a moment. So regarding the Inspiring Dads post here, technically, if her family paid, but these arrangements were apparent, there was Manitowoc County's suggestion on funeral home and cremation, which is quite strange. What place do they have in telling a family how and where they should handle the death of their and funeral of their loved one? It's just really, really bizarre. So other points here, Carmen was a drug user, but she was not into hard drugs. Her drug of choice was marijuana and alcohol. She wasn't a junkie. Next point, Carmen was not pretending to be Teresa Halbach on Halloween or any time for that matter. There are theories floating around about Carmen posing as Teresa Halbach on October 31st because everybody knew Teresa was already dead, but they needed her to be alive in order to put her at Stephen's property that day. Carmen was at home or school during these key times on October 31st. Carmen was found by her grandmother the morning after her death, November 3rd. Carmen and her friend were hanging out the night before at Carmen's house. Her friend was still there in the morning when her grandmother went into the house and found Carmen unresponsive. So just going back to Coburn for a moment, all of this is going down. Coburn's calling anyone and everybody, including the license plate of Teresa Halbach. Carmen Bootwell happens to be dead, and then, of course, calls about Zipper. This is all going down at the same time. All mere coincidence, probably. Okay, Carmen's mom and brother offered a lot more information pertaining to Carmen, but I will not be publishing that information for a number of reasons. One thing I will say, there are a couple of oddities with the way the state handled this case and how long it took for Carmen to be cremated. Do I think the state used Carmen to frame Stephen Avery? I'd say there's a chance. I don't know in what capacity, but there's a chance that somehow Carmen was used in the framing of Stephen Avery. Or everything could be a coincidence, and there's nothing further to see here. But I do know that Kathleen Zellner is fully aware of Carmen, and I'm sure she did her own investigation into it, but nobody knows if anything has come of it. Only time will tell. Again, I know this update is long overdue. I had it drafted, but I wanted to find the right time to post it. Okay. This post was originally posted October 6, 2016, and has been updated a couple of times. So, of course, the Carmen Bootwell situation, very, very dubious. And let's get into the more mind-shocking information here. And actually, one more point. Apparently, this was a methadone overdose, and it's strange because if this is not a hard drug user, or again, this could be parent or, family members saying what they want to be true versus what it is true, but we do see this in law enforcement cover-ups and conspiracies where there are suspect deaths and they try to make someone out to be more of a drug user than they actually are in order to attempt to sweep things under the rug. Of course, that's anybody who's not new to true crime obviously knows that that is done as well. So let's continue on here. These are compilations that I've dug up from various blogs and forums of connections that people have uncovered. So within 30 days, we have Teresa Halbach, Carmen Bootwell, Christine Rudy, who I went over in the previous episode, who was killed 12 days after Halbach's reported missing, 9 days after Carmen Bootwell, and we have yet another individual here connected to the case, Mark Lee Zipperer. Now, of course, I've gone over the Zipperer situations and Teresa Halbach being spotted leaving Stephen Avery's salvage yard, leaving his property, and going elsewhere. Did she go to the Zipperers after she left Avery's, and was this all covered up? Very possible. Now, the Zipperer connections have been quite a few. So we will go over some theories here. Some people believe that all three of these individuals, Carmen Bootwell, Mark Lee Zipper, and Teresa Halbach, were confidential informants or had some kind of connection to confidential informants, all within the scope of Corruptiwak County, where nothing is above board, which is being a confidential informant is dangerous anywhere. But how dangerous would it be in a place like Corruptiwak? That's even more dangerous. Now, all three of these individuals, were there connections to law enforcement that, for whatever reason, necessitated their termination, so to speak, and two of them were set up as a drug overdose, and then 2 birds, 1 stone situation, or 3 birds, 1 stone, possibly 4 if we bring in Christine Rudy and how her bones were handled. Again, if you haven't checked out the previous episode on Christine Rudy, make sure you check those out, and previous episodes regarding the zippers. So what is going on here with the zippers? Someone posted a comment on light-candle.com. And this was birthday wishes for Teresa Halbach in 2016. Someone posted this. They're titled Carmen's Ashes. Teresa, Carmen Bootwell, and you got all mixed up. Teresa, this is speaking to Teresa. Carmen Bootwell and you got all mixed up along with Mark Lee Zipper. And there's a link here to an article that I went over before regarding Remaker's comments on Carmen Bootwell's death, drug death, a painful memory. This article is in the Herald Times Reporter. And there, in this article, there's a bunch of deaths relating to prescription drugs and all of these drug circles. I went over that on previous episodes. Now, the other link here is regarding the Zipper death. Mark Lee Zipper died on November 29th, 2005, literally 1 block away from, guess where? Photography by Teresa. Teresa's photography studio. Literally 1 block away. Mark Lee Zipper, 28, of Green Bay, died unexpectedly Tuesday, November 29th, 2005, at his residence. Teresa Halbach disappeared less than 30 days prior. So, this Zipper, of which Teresa Halbach may have visited after leaving Avery Salvage Yard, involved in the investigation. There's the Zipper voicemail, all of that hoopla and shadiness that, of course, guilters want to just pretend doesn't exist. And it's just really bizarre how, out of all the individuals that could die under suspicious circumstances, 1 block from Teresa Halbach's photography studio, it happens to be Mark Lee Zipper, and he's 28. So there's all these people in their 20s dying suspiciously. You have this strange comment on birthday wishes for those that have passed. It's really bizarre. It's really bizarre. Another comment posted by someone titled Teresa's Friends, May 21st, 2016, the same day as the previous comment. And they give a whole bunch of first names here. Talk to the press. Speak for Teresa. If only you could see the Calumet investigative report, you knew her better than a documentary or online sleuths. Come to Reddit, help fill in the blanks. We have theories, but tell us about October 30th. The documentary is not disparaging Teresa's memory. It opened people's eyes about her loss. And then Ken Sweaty Kratz has a comment here. I never planted any evidence, I just watched. And of course, we don't know if that's really him or not. But you never know with Ken Kratz. Okay. So this is really, really bizarre because how exactly did Mark L. Zipper die? So Mark's father lived 5 miles south of Cuss Road. So, of course, in these out-of-the-box theories, if Teresa Halbach is somehow involved in drugs or some kind of confidential informant. Now, the coincidence theorists usually scoff. The cognitive dissonant coincidence theorists who are, I guess, too mentally weak to consider theories outside of their comfort level with the way they pretend their fairy tale reality works because they just can't handle it. But there are confidential informants out there. And there are corrupt law enforcement out there. What happens when they get mixed? It's really bizarre how many people just do not have the cognitive function to even theorize. I'm not alleging any of this is true. This is MINDSHOCK, where the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. But again, when we're looking coincidentally, these same areas, Cuss Road just keeps coming up. So these are ways, what were Teresa Halbach's exact travel coordinates? Of course, if you haven't checked out all of the MINDSHOCK episodes with the cell towers, make sure you check that out. We go over in detail how cell phone tower pings work and how and what could be tracked and the limitations of such and the time frames. So in these out-of-the-box theories we have, people are theorizing that Teresa Halbach might have left Stephen Avery's to drive to Cuss Road via County Road Q to meet Mark Lee Zipper, possibly for a drug transaction or to meet a mutual friend or associate of some kind. And for the people who think this is all impossible, let's go even further into MINDSHOCK land. So apparently, a relative of a DCI agent involved in the Teresa Halbach case lived on Cuss Road in 2005. Another DCI agent went undercover as an auto trader photographer. Does anyone want to guess what year? It was 2005. Early 2005. You cannot make this stuff up. So the DCI, of course, the Division of Criminal Investigation. For those that don't know, in Wisconsin, the Division of Criminal Investigation is charged with purely criminal investigative mission and function. The division employs special agents who are sworn law enforcement officers possessing statewide jurisdiction and charged with the responsibility of enforcing the laws of the state of Wisconsin. The division also has a cadre of digital criminal and investigative program analysts who support Wisconsin's law enforcement agencies. Finally, our administrative support personnel help the division be responsive to the citizens of Wisconsin and all of our criminal justice partners. The DCI has a primary responsibility of investigating crimes that are statewide in nature or importance. DCI special agents and analysts work closely with the local, county, tribal, state, and federal officials to investigate and prosecute crimes involving homicide, arson, financial crimes, illegal gaming, multi-jurisdictional crimes, drug trafficking, computer crimes, homeland security, public integrity, and government corruption, as well as crimes against children. The division also performs special investigations requested by the governor of the legislature. In addition, the division provides extensive training to local, state, and federal officers on current issues in law enforcement. The division provides extensive training to local, state, and federal officers on current issues in law enforcement and performs special investigations requested by the governor or the legislature. And this is directly from doj.state.wi.us regarding what the DCI is and their function. So, for the clueless coincidence theorist guilters who think that even if Manitowoc were corrupt, the state would never be complicit in any way in helping them. So, two issues there. One, we have DCI agents on the ground in the area. One of them is a relative living right on Cuss Road. Another DCI agent actually went undercover, not just for any business, but for Auto Trader, the exact magazine that Teresa Halbach happens to work for. All purely coincidental, probably, right? I mean, you cannot make this stuff up. So if they're involved in some of the Manitowoc corruption, now there's two options here. One, they're involved and they're helping cover up. Two, maybe they're there investigating Corruptawak. And for whatever reason, they cannot proceed because of, again, these higher ups. We have Vogel. We have all of these corrupt individuals in the court system. Just how corrupt is not only Manitowoc, but the state of Wisconsin. And how much of the DCI would be corrupt. Now, again, we're not talking widespread corruption. We're talking about just a few individuals, but in various positions of power, so it might be tricky to take them all down, particularly if they have allies in certain areas. And who's pulling the strings here? Now, the FBI, it does seem less likely that the FBI would be complicit, but as we've gone over in all these laboratory evidentiary reports and such, the evidence is sent to the FBI. The FBI does not verify where it came from. It's sent with a label. The FBI gives its report. The FBI has no reason to believe that all of these agencies are corrupt and all of these people submitting are corrupt, even if they are. So, continuing on here with these DCI issues. Now, across the street, so on CASO, page 518 is a mention of one of the DCI investigators on the case in the Appleton field office being one Michael Sass. And one of his relatives is actually living across the street from Leo Richmond on Cuss Road. Leo Richmond happens to be the guy that called in the tip to CASO about Teresa Halbach knocking on his door the night before. This would be November 4th. So he called in this tip on November 5th about the night before, 11:30 p.m., Friday, November 4th. Leo said that Teresa was looking for a home in the area. Weigert apparently was not interested. He said he would call back later, but there's no follow-up report or mention of Weigert following up on this staggering report, this staggering tip. Someone saying Teresa Halbach knocked on their door and talked to them at 11:30 p.m. Friday, November 4th on Cuss Road. Okay, Weigert apparently dismisses this, or it's erased, or any kind of follow-up is completely erased. Coincidentally, right across the street from Leo is a close relative of Michael Sass, DCI agent. Now, how coincidental is that? How coincidental is that? Or at least at the time of the disappearance. Obviously, this is many years later. These individuals might not own these homes now, but at the time, and then of course, Cuss Road has been the subject of much speculation. There's been a lot of funny activity at Cuss Road, to put it lightly. And is this all coincidental? Now, from people discussing this, apparently they no longer own this house, but at some point, whether it's the current owner or the current owner of several years ago, people going through public records, this is, of course, everything is public here. I don't discuss anybody not previously named. The current owner apparently is, guess who? Ken Kratz's mentor, the head of litigation for Wisconsin DCI. Or a family member. That's their last name. This is, of course, Doug Hagg, who was the head of the litigation department for the Wisconsin DCI. So Ken Kratz's mentor was the head of the litigation department for the Wisconsin DCI, Doug Hagg. Do people find that curious? There's a lot going on Cuss Road. I mean, this might be the most mind-shocking episode yet. The stack of coincidences and anomalies is just never ending. Out of all the people Now, for the coincidence theorists, they say, well, someone has to own it. Yes, indeed. Now go through all of the houses owned in all of the area, and you won't find you won't find coincidences like these. That's the whole point. So mathematically and statistically, it's quite interesting to say the least. And Ken Kratz's redacted emails that have since been released, he's actually still in constant contact with Doug Hagg. And there are, I think, several Doug Haggs with 2 A's. So theoretically, it's possible it's not the same guy. But if it is, that would be quite curious, would it not? And of course, Ken Kratz did go to the Avery salvage yard to overlook the so-called investigation, the planting, whatever you want to call it. Now, the plot thickens here because if this sighting of Teresa Halbach is legitimate, is it possible something happened to her then and at Cuss Road? And then all of these other narratives were spun to cover things up. And then, of course, so Radon's hunting camp is right there. The Cuss Road site is right there. Everything is going on right there. And with the individuals involved, it's quite curious indeed. Here's an interesting post from Reddit. Somewhere in all the readings about the case, a CI is involved. Auto Trader-like magazines have always been a bookie's dream and no doubt a place to launder money for the drug trade. Some theories presented in TikTok Manitowoc have been that Teresa Halbach was working for the Justice Department. If Teresa Halbach had been discovered as being undercover, could that have caused the death of cousin Carmen? You may not feel they look alike, but I see they could be sisters. Did a certain drug dealer give Carmen an extra heavy dose of heroin thinking she was Teresa Halbach? Now that is a mind-shocking theory we haven't discussed. That is absolutely mind-shocking. Did Teresa Halbach then become too hot for the Justice Department to continue to being an operative in Manitowoc County, removed to go on assignment like in the Washington State area? The sheriff of Manitowoc County then makes the best of a bad thing. He uses Carmen's bones to set up Stephen Avery. He has her blood on file, just enough from a vial to make the SUV look like a crime happened. And if needed, Teresa Halbach would donate her blood so that it appeared she was dead to the cartels. Now, that is quite a mind-shocking theory that we have not gone over yet. Possibly the most mind-shocking of all. So, is it possible that Teresa Halbach was working for the Justice Department in some capacity? There's DCI agents involved. There's other CI agents involved. DCI agents involved. Something weird happened. And this is how they covered it up? I don't know. Is that possible? Would that explain her family's attitude? And does her family even know? Would they even tell them? Would that be considered too dangerous or not? So here's an interesting write-up as well. Again, these are posted on forums, copy-pasted. I don't see sources here. Even conversations with Ken Kratz on Twitter and other individuals. So many things about her bothered me, so I dug. And what do you know? In 1995, Kathy Williford pops up as a DOJ special agent named in an appeal. And if you try to search DOJ special agent Kathy Williford online, it all comes back to Kathy Williford with a K. Feel caught. So she's both with a C and with a K, and that name is semi-common. I mean, that's not the most original name, so it's tough. But some Twitter posts here. She worked for Auto Trader when she was a stay-at-home mom. Long after working for Wisconsin DCI, she worked for Milwaukee Narcotics, 94 to 97. If her footage is used in the 8-hour final cut, it will be pointed out. No need to point it out in a teaser. So these are statements from hers DCI interview. Many years ago, before I had children, I was in law enforcement for a time, and then once the kids came along, I stayed home, raised both our children, and went back to work in the last 5 years full-time in the medical profession. I work in medical billing now. For about 3.5 years, I worked mainly in narcotics enforcement in Milwaukee. All of those cases were drug related, but I think there's a lot of training that goes along as far as being observant, interviewing people, reading people, and I think a lot of that comes into play and stays with you the rest of your life. In order to work in law enforcement, you have to become certified, so I was in certified law enforcement after getting out of college. When I stayed home to raise our children, the older one was in school and the younger one was starting kindergarten, and I just wanted to find a job that was part-time, that I could do a couple hours a week, a couple days a week, but still raise the children at home when they needed me. So I saw an ad in the paper for Auto Trader magazine, and what I really liked about it was that I could set my own hours, I could work out of my house, take pictures of vehicles at my schedule. I think it was in and around December 2004, I started to work for Auto Trader, and I'd work 1 or 2 days a week and drive around the geographical area around Sheboygan, Wisconsin, taking pictures of cars that would go in the magazine for sale. I stayed with Auto Trader from about December 2004, I think, till around April 2005, and then I realized that I wasn't really making any money. Okay, so here's the other thing. If there was some kind of undercover DCI component, would this be the statement that was made that, of course, denying any involvement if this is some kind of undercover position? And this was a post on TikTok. Manitowoc case a witness was most likely a DOJ special agent. Found it odd that Angela Schuster of Auto Trader said in her DCI interview she thinks Williford works for the state of Wisconsin. And this, Kathy D. Williford was interviewed by investigator Mark Weigert. And this is page 331, complaint number 05-0157-955. On January 4th, 2006, approximately 1800 hours, I, investigator Weigert of the Calumet County Sheriff's Department, had telephone contact with Kathy Williford. My reason for contacting Kathy was that she was a photographer for Auto Trader magazine prior to Teresa Halbach. Kathy states she started working for the Auto Trader magazine on December 2nd, 2004, and worked until April 20th, 2005. So Kathy's being interviewed by Weigert in regards to her visit to Avery's. And it says here, McGrath then interviewed Angie Schuster, the manager of Auto Trader magazine. McGrath inquired about any other photographers who had taken photos at the Avery property. Schuster believed that Kathy Williford, a former photographer for Auto Trader magazine, had taken photos out there on one occasion. Williford had contacted Schuster after Halbach's disappearance and stated that she had been out to the Avery property and that Stephen Avery had invited her into the house, however she declined. Schuster believes that Williford was employed with the state of Wisconsin. Interesting. And then, of course, Kathy is named in an appeal affirmation as a Wisconsin Department of Justice special agent in 1996. Of course, these are all public documents. So that's interesting. That's interesting. Especially, it seems like an out-of-the-ordinary statement. So back to this TikTok Manitowoc post, I found it particularly odd a photographer with Auto Trader is suddenly jumping to the ranks of a state employee. Why wouldn't it be weird if she already was? Kathy Williford is in the new Convicting a Murderer trailer as the "It Could Have Been Me" sobbing moron. Turns out, in 1995, a convicted felon's appeal was confirmed. The arresting officers in that case, some DOJ guy, and DOA Special Agent Kathy W. Name redacted, but you know who it is. However, this Kathy is with a C. The report has nothing to do with Avery. It was found during a search of a lawyer's news website for a case that was affirmed in 1996, and she was named in it. Any online search for Kathy links right back to the one in the documentary. So now, Deb Strauss's call on November 4th, almost a full day before the RAV4 is found, to Queso, offering her help to investigate Stephen because she is, quote, not a fan of that guy, end quote, makes sense. DOJ setup all the way. A DOA agent takes photographs for Auto Trader, and after 4 months, she quits the job. Then, 10 months later, Teresa, who had been to Williford's house. Williford, the only other Auto Trader employee to ever meet Teresa other than Shuster, ends up dead. And DOJ swarms the Avery property, but not before another DOJ special agent, Deb Strauss, calls Queso before any evidence is found and offers to help investigate. Kathy is documented in court files as being a DOJ special agent. I am sure there is an explanation of why she's an agent, then suddenly not when she steps on Avery's property. But the ball will be in DOJ's court to explain this. Which is more likely? She stopped being a law enforcement agent in her mid-30s and suddenly decided to take photographs of cars for about $8 to $18 per car. Pictures in the middle of winter in an area documented by the manager of Auto Trader as not getting much business in the winter months. Or she was employed by the DOJ visiting the property where the DOJ would be swarming 10 months later. I'd say it's more likely she was undercover as a photographer on the property to shoot surveillance photos in a way that didn't look suspicious at all. If Kathy Williford stepped on the Avery property on January 2005 as a DCI agent and Shuster confirms her employment, you have to ask, why was a DOJ agent undercover with them and at Avery's? Surveillance? Plans for a later frame-up? DOJ would know the trailer and garage layout. Interesting. Very, very interesting. See, the other thing that, again, the cognitive dissonant coincidence theorist guilters say is they wouldn't go through all this trouble just for Avery. But if we're looking at some major corrupt-walk exposure in all these other cases and wrongdoing, possibly some drug trafficking by police officers, if there's way more corruption going on, it's almost like Avery's lawsuit was just, it was more of a convenient reason to get rid of Avery while simultaneously sweeping all these other things under the rug that they would never want exposed. So it wasn't really just about Avery. And the other thing is, there were rumors early on, of course, that Stephen Avery knows some stuff. He knows some stuff, his family knows some stuff about how law enforcement conducts business in the area, possibly with these drugs connections or otherwise. So was this kind of a warning shot? Keep your mouth closed or you get framed for murder and put away. Anybody who doesn't toe the corrupt-walk line. Is that what's going on here? So Barb Janda in 2007 actually made this strange comment, I think the Halbachs set this whole thing up, I really do. And that's an interesting comment. And then there have been various individuals throughout the case that say they believe that Teresa Halbach is still alive or possibly could still be alive. There's other speculation that Teresa Halbach was a CI specifically getting a job to spy on Stephen Avery or possible other individuals through her job at Auto Trader, which is quite interesting. Quite interesting. The other thing is, what if Teresa Halbach was a CI, was involved in all this shadiness, and she wanted to get out of it? And let's say she saw too much, so to speak. Of course, I'll get into all of the photography issues with her photography business and people she might have crossed paths with in association with law enforcement and otherwise that facilitated them wanting to take her out. But again, let's not fall for false dichotomies here. More than one thing could be going on at the same time. So if she is some kind of CI, and she's been to the Avery salvage yard many times, and then we have the whole Cuss Road situation and the people that live there, all of these ties to DCI, what is going on here? It's so bizarre. So let's get even more into MINDSHOCK land. So let's go back to the Queso file. So let's talk, Martinez made a very interesting comment. So we haven't examined Andre Martinez at length thus far, but we'll do that now. Some people actually believe that he's the one responsible for Teresa Halbach's disappearance. Some basic timeline issues here. July 21st, 2005, Andre Martinez, is a customer of Avery Salvage and visited the yard frequently, 3 to 4 times per month. His car wreck was taken there July 21st, 2005. And this is sourced from a Daily Mail article, exclusive. I know they didn't do it. New claim in making a murder case from fellow prisoner who tried to decapitate his ex with an axe hours after missing woman's car was found just 15 miles away. Lawyers for one of the 2 convicted men in making a murder have been told of an extraordinary claim by another prisoner that he has proof of their innocence. The violent offender, a regular customer of the salvage yard run by the family of the 2 men, sought out one of their mothers during a prison visit to tell her that her son, Brendan Dassey, and her brother, Stephen Avery, were wrongfully convicted of the killing. Andre Fuentes Martinez, 52, is serving 30 years in Green Bay Correctional after he severely wounded Charlene Edwards with an axe at their shared home in Manitowoc, Wisconsin on November 5th, 2005, while screaming, "Die, dirty expletive," as he hacked at her. His claim of the men's innocence is the latest twist in the case highlighted by Netflix Making a Murder, which has enthralled millions around the world. Daily Mail Online can reveal it for the first time, and a series of links between Martinez and Avery Auto Salvage Yard, where Teresa Halbach was last seen, and where her SUV and charred remains were found. Of course, that's not where she was last seen, but anyway, Andre Martinez's attempts to kill his ex and Teresa Halbach's RAV4 were discovered on the same day, a few miles apart. Earl Avery tells Daily Mail Online Martinez was on the Avery yard when the RAV4 was found. So this is curious. So 1:15 a.m., Manitowoc City, Andre Martinez attacks his ex-girlfriend with an axe, then goes on the run. And for whatever reason, several hours later, at 10:20 a.m., Teresa Halbach's RAV4 is found by searchers, and Earl Avery says Andre Martinez was on the property at the time. Just another oddity to add. I mean, is Avery Salvage Yard that popular of a hangout that even guys that attempt to murder their ex-girlfriends with an axe want to go hang out there? It's just that popular of a spot, I guess. According to the Avery family, Martinez had visited their auto salvage yard 15 miles from his home earlier that day. On the morning of November 5th, Halbach's car was found at the car yard. Martinez bought parts at the salvage yard 3 or 4 times a month, according to the Averys, in the year before Halbach, a 25-year-old photographer, visited the property. Her last known whereabouts were at the lot on the outskirts of Two Rivers after she had gone to photograph a minivan for Auto Trader magazine on October 31st, 2005. Her murder is detailed in the documentary series Making a Murder, which has captivated viewers around the world since it began streaming on Netflix December 18th. One of the 3 Avery brothers, Stephen, was arrested for Halbach's murder on November 9th, 2005, after her car was found on the edge of the 40-acre property. Halbach's charred bones and remains of her cell phone were found in a fire pit near Stephen Avery's trailer. Or were they? He was charged on November 15th with first-degree murder, mutilation of a corpse, and possession of firearms by a felon. The firearm that wasn't his. Special prosecutor Ken Kratz said that Avery's blood had been found in Halbach's car and that he was the last person to see her alive. Also not true. Shortly before he was arrested for Halbach's murder, Avery had filed a $36 million federal lawsuit against the county, its former sheriff, and district attorney for wrongful conviction. Stephen Avery had been released in 2003 after spending 18 years in jail for a 1985 rape he didn't commit before being freed on DNA evidence. 4 months later, after Avery's arrest, his nephew, Brendan Dassey, then 16, told police he had helped rape, stab, shoot, and dismember Halbach on his uncle's order. The teen had an IQ score of 70, which qualifies him as intellectually disabled. He later said his confession was coerced. And of course, this is also a minor. Regardless of IQ, this is a minor without a parent. In March 2007, Avery was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. A month later, his 16-year-old nephew was found guilty of Halbach's murder and sexual assault and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of early release in 2048. They and members of the Avery family have long maintained their innocence. Sandra Greenman, Stephen Avery's former fiancée, told Daily Mail Online that authorities had tunnel vision in the murder case and did not look at other suspects. The 73-year-old, along with Dassey's mother, Barbara Tadych, and Stephen Avery's mother, Dolores Avery, revealed their suspicions for the first time about the Axeman as an individual who had escaped the police attention. On July 21st, 2005, Andre Martinez called the auto salvage business to have them retrieve his 1997 Volkswagen Jetta after he was rear-ended on the highway and the car was left a complete write-off. Charles Avery said. The Averys collected the car from an off-ramp of I-43 and brought it to the yard where it was stripped for parts. The wrecked car still sits on the property. A vehicle history report tied to the car's VIN revealed that on July 21st, 2005, the Volkswagen was involved in a collision with another vehicle in Wisconsin. The Avery's business logbook from 2005 reveals that on July 22nd, the car was listed at the yard. The owner's details were written down as Rene Camacho with an address on the 1900 block of Franklin Street in Manitowoc. Andre Martinez lived at that address, but it is not clear why the name Rene Camacho is listed, as Charles Avery told Daily Mail Online that Martinez completed the transaction. Camacho later became the son-in-law of Martinez's ex-girlfriend, Charlene Edwards. Camacho did not respond to messages from Daily Mail Online. Charles Avery told Daily Mail Online that Martinez came 3 or 4 times a month to the business for car parts. It is not clear whether Martinez was on the Avery property on the day Halbach went missing. But Earl Avery told Daily Mail Online that Martinez was at the yard on November 5th. That was the same day Earl gave permission to volunteers and law enforcement to search for signs of Halbach. Her Toyota RAV4 was found on the edge of the 40-acre property that morning. According to court documents, at 1:30 p.m. that afternoon, Martinez, then 42, attacked his ex-girlfriend Charlene Edwards at her home on the 1900 block of Franklin Street in downtown Manitowoc. She was struck twice with an axe and suffered severe head injuries, according to sentencing documents seen by Daily Mail Online. Martinez also swung the hatchet at a child in the home, missing by only a few inches. He also struck a dog with the hatchet, according to court papers. According to a criminal complaint from November 15, 2005, Martinez attacked his girlfriend in front of her son, 16, and 17-year-old daughter, who were thrown across the room by him as they tried to protect their mother. Edwards' son told police that Martinez had let himself into the house with a key to write a note for his mom, who was on her way home from work with her daughter. The complaint reads, Charlene walked into the kitchen and she saw Andre and told Andre she didn't want to see him anymore. Edwards' son said Charlene told Andre she was seeing someone else, and Andre called Charlene a dirty expletive. The complaint said the pair began arguing about a Chevrolet Cavalier, which Martinez claimed to have bought but was registered under Edwards' name. The son said Andre became very upset with Charlene and began yelling at her that you can die, you expletive, saying the next time he came over he would smash out all the windows in the house, said he'd burn down the house with the kids in it, and told her, I hope you burn in hell. According to the victim's son, Martinez then grabbed his mother and threw her to the floor on her stomach while she called out to her children for help. The children attempted to intervene, but Martinez knocked them to the floor. The complainant further alleges that the son said Andre went into a pantry that was off the kitchen by the stove, and when he came back into the kitchen, he had a hatchet in his hand. He said Andre grabbed Charlene's left leg while she was still lying on her stomach and said, die, dirty expletive, as he brought the hatchet up in his right hand about to his head height and struck Charlene with the hatchet in the back of her head, back of her neck. With the help of her children, Edwards managed to flee to a tattoo parlor across the street who called 911. The victim was hospitalized with a large wound in the back of her head close to her neck. She also suffered a laceration to her arm from trying to protect her head from the axe. According to the complaint, when asked by an officer why the attack had happened, Edwards said, "To kill me." That's kind of weird, though, because he's saying he's going to come back and knock all the windows out and burn the house down, but then why is he attacking then? Obviously, he's not not a logical individual. Martinez, who was charged with domestic assault on Edwards a month earlier, told her he would kill her if she left him. Following the attack, Martinez dropped the axe and fled the property. He surrendered to police 2 days later after he was found hiding at a friend's trailer south of Manitowoc, but not before visiting the Avery salvage yard. Following his arrest, Martinez told a Manitowoc police officer that every time someone talked negative to him, it just fills me up into anger. Sounds like he needed some anger management classes. At the time of the axe attack, Martinez, a Cuban national who had moved to the U.S., was out on bail for a domestic violence assault on Edwards. According to reports, on October 2nd, Edwards drove to a bar where Martinez pulled her from the car by her hair and slapped her. Martinez was charged with the battery of Charlene Edwards and ordered to have no contact with her and stay away from her home. Martinez was also on parole from prison at the time after serving 16 years for a string of burglaries in the Manitowoc area. Prior to that, in 1983, he was found guilty of operating a vehicle without the owner's consent. I mean, is that theft? What is exactly is that charge? Operating a vehicle without owner's consent? I mean, if you steal a car and drive it, is that the same charge? He also spent time in jail for petty theft, forgery, and damage to a vehicle. At his sentencing for the axe attacks, the prosecution said Martinez had spent much of his life in prison and added he is a violent man. Whatever he wants, he will stop at nothing to get it. Martinez's defense was the attack took place while he was suffering from a blackout, but a doctor could not support the claim. His defense lawyer, Robert DeWayne, told the court that Martinez abused controlled substances during his relationship with Edwards and claimed they used drugs together. Martinez was found guilty of attempted first-degree intentional homicide in September 2006. Charges of second-degree reckless endangering safety, physical abuse of a child, mistreating an animal, and bail jumping were dismissed by the prosecutor. Why? Martinez was sentenced to 30 years in prison and becomes eligible for release in 2035. He is currently serving his time at Green Bay alongside Brendan Dassey. Dassey's mother, Barbara Taddeich, told Daily Mail Online this week that Martinez approached her when he was visiting her son at the prison 3 or 4 years ago. According to Taddeich, Martinez was the inmate assigned to take photos of other prisoners and their families during visiting hours. She said that Martinez recognized her. He spoke real soft so the guards didn't hear him. He said, "I know Brendan and Steve didn't do this. Brendan doesn't belong here," Taddeich told Daily Mail Online. Taddeich said that her son did not associate with Martinez or any other prisoner and never talked about his case. She said that he spent most of his time playing card games like cribbage. "Brendan's doing pretty good," she said, "but he always says he wants to come home." Taddeich said she had informed one of her son's defense lawyers, Laura Nirider, about her interaction with Martinez. It is unclear whether Avery's legal team was aware of this information. Martinez's ex-wife, Varian Martinez, told Daily Mail Online that he had nothing to do with the Teresa Halbach murder and that the Avery family had tried before to pin it on him. That's interesting. So instead of some kind of a bitter ex-wife, we have an ex-wife sticking up for her ex-husband here. She said, "I know what they're trying to do because I heard this before. They're trying to say my ex-husband was out there. No, he was not out there. I know there are some crazy people. I don't care what anyone says. My ex-husband is not like that. You know, he's kind of crazy, but not like that." Not like what? Someone to visit a salvage yard? She claimed the investigators had already looked at her ex-husband as a potential suspect. She said, "A long time ago, the FBI had me and my son come to Burger King to talk about that." Wow, is that the preferred meeting spot of FBI for interviews, Burger King? Is this how they do things in Manitowoc? "I told them that Martinez, did not have anything to do with that." Vivian Martinez told Daily Mail Online that she was always with her ex-husband when he went to the Avery salvage yard. She added, "We would go out there to get parts for cars. He was never out there by himself. Those people know what they did to that girl and they're trying to blame it on someone else. They know they did that expletive." Well, how would she know she wasn't there? Weird. They're not going to pin this on him. He wasn't out there by himself. His ex-wife said that Martinez's axe attack on his former girlfriend was also a misunderstanding. Wait a second. His ex-wife thinks that attacking someone and trying to bludgeon their head with an axe is simply a misunderstanding, and also swinging at a child and attacking the dog. This is bizarre. This is our bizarre woman. They are not going to pin out there. He wasn't out there. Okay. Vivian married Andre Martinez in August 1984, and the couple divorced in 1997. He was previously married in Cuba, but got a divorce before coming to the U.S. He and his former wife have 2 sons. She retained sole custody for their sons, according to family court records. Charlene Edwards Ross died of cancer, aged 45, on October 9th, 2014. She is survived by her husband, 2 sons, and 2 daughters. Police told Daily Mail Online this week that they had not established a link between Martinez and the Averys. Deputy Chief Tony Dick told the local Herald Times Reporter newspaper in 2005 that the suspect had a long history with the police department. When asked about the case by Daily Mail Online this week, Dick, who has since retired from the department, said he had no knowledge of Martinez's connection to the Averys. Sounds like a very astute police chief. The police report on the axe attack was not immediately available from the Manitowoc Police Department. Manitowoc Sheriff's Department told Daily Mail Online that questions regarding the Avery case should be referred to Calumet County Sheriff as lead investigators. Daily Mail Online was awaiting a response from Calumet County. Okay. Interesting. Very, very interesting. So, that is who this Andre Martinez individual is. Okay. October 20th, he's charged with battery. October 20th, 2005, he's charged with battery by Manitowoc County. October 31st, 2005, Teresa Halbach is last seen at Avery Salvage, or leaving Avery Salvage, although there are some sightings afterwards that are swept under the rug. November 5th, 2005, in the morning, Andre was at Avery Salvage at the time of Teresa Halbach's vehicle being discovered. I don't know. Maybe he really does have blackouts, because if he blacks out after the axe attack and then he's just wandering about, I need some car parts, I'll just go to Avery's. And that happens to be when Pam of God Sturm is magically led to Teresa Halbach's RAV4, which might not even be her RAV4, of course, if you haven't checked out the MINDSHOCK episodes on the RAV4 issues, of which there is no shortage. Very, very confusing whether or not that was even the same RAV4. November 5th, 2006, at 1:30 p.m. There's an a.m.? Wait a second. So Andre took an axe to his wife 1:30 a.m., according to Daily Mail. Okay. November 7th, 2005, Andre was arrested 11:45 a.m. by Manitowoc County Police. Arresting officer unknown. They keep really good records in 2005 in Manitowoc County. Okay, in questioning after arrest, Martinez said, this is really bizarre. This is really, really bizarre. So this is the defendant's statement on third-party responsibility. Case number 2005-CF-381. You can find this on StephenAveryCase.org. On page 11, Andre Martinez had been to the Avery salvage yard too many times to count, but denied being there on October 31st. ACISS Investigative Report number 05-1776/113 at 3 and 4. Indeed, he said he had been to the salvage yard only 2 or 3 times in the preceding 6 months. He denied killing Teresa Halbach. However, on November 5th, 2005, he attacked his girlfriend with a hatchet. Then, under law enforcement questioning, Martinez made a notable statement. He said that if the Avery family was saying that he killed Miss Halbach, he would take the blame for it because he was going to spend the rest of his life in prison anyway. Is that an interesting statement to make? Martinez said he met Stephen Avery once in prison in 1998, perhaps, but that they were not friends, so he wasn't sure. Martinez's story then began to change. The following day, Martinez claimed to a Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department sergeant not otherwise involved in this investigation, Sergeant Chaloux, that Stephen Avery had informed him of a young girl who had come to the salvage yard on several occasions to take photographs. He claimed that Avery told him that he, Avery, was going to kill her the next time she came. Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department summary at 1 November 17, 2005. Martinez did not explain why he had made no mention of this the day before, and did not explain why Stephen Avery would have said that if they had only met that once 7 years earlier. So if you saw some guy once 7 years ago, you're immediately going to tell him of what you're planning to kill somebody. It's just weird. 12 days later, I mean, if you're Stephen Avery, let's examine this. Ken Kratz probably thinks this is legitimate. But a random customer on your yard, you're just going to tell the random customer, yeah, this girl comes to take pictures. Next time she comes, I'm going to kill her. I mean, Ken Kratz probably would buy that. Since it makes Avery look guilty, I guess. But would anybody in their right mind ever say that? Especially when you have a $36 million lawsuit coming. Back to this report, 12 days later, when interviewed in the Green Bay Correctional Institution, Martinez said initially that he had changed his mind and did not want to speak. Case report, page 980. But he did. He now claimed to be friends with Stephen Avery, and he said that he would, quote, would commonly go to the junkyard, sometimes as often as a couple times a day, end quote. Okay. So Avery salvage is that popular. Even these would-be axe murderers, they have nothing better to do than to go to the yard multiple times a day. So you go find a car part, then you go for lunch, then you're going back to the salvage yard. I mean, because where else would you go? I mean, that's just the spot to hang out. Then you leave for dinner, then you're going to come back again, come back at night, come back multiple times a day. Oh, man, let me read that again. I don't know what to make of this. He said he, quote, would commonly go to the junkyard, Avery Auto Salvage, sometimes as often as a couple times a day. A day, not a month, not a week, a day. So he would come and go to the junkyard multiple times a day. Okay. All right, let's continue here. He now claimed that he and Stephen Avery had spied on Teresa Halbach from a hill on a previous occasion, admitting now for the first time that he personally had seen Miss Halbach, and that Avery had taken pictures of her. To date, the state has not claimed that it has recovered any such pictures. So are these delusional ramblings of Martinez, who supposedly has blackouts? I don't know. The case report, page 981. He claimed that Avery said that he intended to dispose of Miss Halbach. Case report, page 980. And he told an implausible story about Avery suspecting that Miss Halbach was coming to the house to, quote, pinpoint Avery for a crime he did not commit. Okay, interesting. So Martinez is stating that Stephen Avery told him that Avery was suspecting that Halbach was coming to his house to pin a crime on Avery. How interesting is that? Supposedly, Avery also said that Miss Halbach had a baggie that he wanted to get. Case report, page 981. A baggie? Does that mean drugs? Is this an insinuation that Teresa Halbach is dealing drugs with Stephen Avery? Is she Stephen Avery's drug dealer? Again, how many layers are here? Is she a CI, possibly working for the Justice Department? Is she dealing drugs with auto trader customers attempting to bust a bigger ring? What is going on here? So, case report, page 981. Asked why Avery would tell him these things, Martinez now claimed that he and Stephen Avery got along very well and that Stephen trusted him. Even Martinez's own son would not support that claim. He denied that his dad had any connection with the Averys other than purchasing parts, and said that his dad never had socialized with or hung around the Averys. Although it would be interesting how he would know that of his dad, unless he was with his dad every second of every day. So this was ACISS Investigative Report number 05-1776/136 at 4. A schoolgirl, KS, heard from her friend, AM, that Martinez, Don Haschultz, Stephen Avery, and another Stephen had been at a bonfire and party at the Avery residence. And again, with all these parties and bonfires going on, except the night of Halloween, of course, if you haven't checked out the Legend of the Bonfire aspect from the MINDSHOCK podcast, check that out. Obviously, there was no that bonfire that night got canceled. But there were other bonfires, many other bonfires, other times. So in some of these parties, so is Martinez really friends with Stephen Avery? And did he visit him at these other parties? Now we have information from a schoolgirl here identified, KS, hearing from her friend AM that Martinez partied with Avery. Were there drugs involved? Who supplied the drugs? What is going on at the Avery salvage yard, and does it involve law enforcement? AM confirmed that she heard from Don Haynes that Martinez and his friend Roberto Brooks were at the Avery property on October 30th. Is this all made up? Did the police coerce these individuals to make these statements? KH and another friend of AM confirmed that Roberto Brooks, who dates her mother, was told by Roberto Brooks that he saw Teresa Halbach on October 30th and that, quote, he knows all about it, end quote. So Roberto Brooks knows all about it? All about what? All about Teresa Halbach and Halloween? Two Rivers Police Department detail at 3-4, November 21st, 2005. Brooks denied any connection, but had only his unsupported claim that he was at home, apparently alone, most of the day on October 31st, 2005. ACIS Investigative Report number 05-1776/161 at 4. Okay, so another guy with no alibi. Indeed, Brooks' girlfriend, Dawn Haschultz, contradicted him in part. She claimed that she was also at home with Brooks on Halloween and that her son was at home too because he was recovering from surgery on his foot. Case report, page 327. Brooks did admit a long friendship with Martinez, ACISS Investigative Report number 05-1776/161 at 3. Most recently and cryptically, Martinez wrote to investigator Mark Weigert on December 4th, 2006, that he was, quote, sorry to inform you that there's no possible way for me to help you with the truth in Miss Halbach case. I pray for her family to get the justice they deserve, end quote. He said he felt sorry for not coming forward with what he knows about Mr. Steve A. He ended, just a note to tell you that I won't be coming forward to tell you what I have heard. I've heard stuff, but I'm going to tell you I'm not going to come forward with it. Martinez is an interesting character. Martinez offered an alibi. His girlfriend's 16-year-old son claimed that he had been together for about 4 hours the afternoon of October 31st, case report, page 225. He also claimed to have gone trick-or-treating that evening together. Why a 16-year-old boy would not have been in school on a Monday afternoon, or why a 16-year-old would go trick-or-treating with an adult, remain unexplored. I mean, that's an interesting official defendant statement. Court document here that I'm reading. It's funny that they phrased it like that. Very, very interesting. So again, we have this Martinez character who made a lot of weird statements. So some people believe, again, Andre Martinez actually was the responsible party for whatever happened to Teresa Halbach. This was posted on the Making a Murderer subreddit by Warnoka 5 years ago. Of course, that subreddit is a bit of a sham. Although it's gotten better recently as it's becoming more and more obvious that this was a frame job. So they postulated this. Being a frequent customer of Avery Salvage, Andre had strong knowledge of the yard and the Averys. In his court case for the axe attack, he stated that he'd been suffering from major blackouts recently. Police framing motive, the key, if Lenk or Coburn were the arresting officers of Martinez. And how crazy is it that the arresting officers are not even listed? What kind of department is this? In 2005, they don't document arresting officers for attempted axe murder? What is going on in Manitowoc? This is weird. Okay, either way, if Lenk or Coburn were the arresting officers of Martinez and arrested Martinez prior to finding the key, it's quite possible that Martinez, if he killed Teresa Halbach, had the key with him and it was confiscated by officers and planted at Avery's. Why would they do this? Well, they were about to lose the $36 million filed by Stephen Avery. Critical timeline, what time or date was Martinez taken into custody? This was Monday, November 7th, 2005, 11:45 a.m. What time or date was the key found at Avery's? Tuesday, November 8th, 2005. Interesting research. Newspaper clippings on the Martinez arrest, November 2005, showcases that Manitowoc County Police Chief Perry Kingsbury was in command at the time. Also, Deputy Chief Tony Dick is also involved. Look at this picture. Isn't it odd that the axe murder and a missing person, Teresa Halbach, are on the same front page of the newspaper at the same time? Top stories of the day, woman missing, man charged in axe murder. I mean, Manitowoc is an interesting place, is it not? Is it not? That's really bizarre. A short time later, Police Chief Perry and 2 other officers were fired for misconduct. Interesting. Very interesting. So from lawyersandsettlements.com, there's a write-up on this here. Manitowoc, November 21st, 2007. Police Chief Perry Kingsbury brought charges against the city alleging that he was wrongfully terminated following a year-long investigation by a Madison law firm. Attorneys compiling the report recommended Kingsbury be fired for inefficiencies and official misconduct. He had been promoted to chief in April 2002 as part of a settlement reached. Sources claim that the city agreed to pay Kingsbury $80,000, which includes $48,576.84 in earned benefits he was entitled to as an employee, including vacation, sick leave, and floating holiday payouts. Further, the settlement agreement stated that city officials believe Kingsbury is not guilty of criminal misconduct related to his handling of city funds, and that the former chief did not intend to misappropriate city funds. That's kind of interesting, though, because if he was terminated, why was he terminated? So we know Corruptowalk is corrupt, but in terms of how they handle other corruption, was Perry and these 2 other officers, were they fired as scapegoats for something? And it's weird. It's weird because you don't normally see any kind of accountability in Manitowoc. So that does throw a wrench in a couple things. And it's weird. Martinez tells Barb Dassey that he knows they didn't do it. It is actually kind of weird. Here's another mind shock. Someone dug this up. Oh, wow. This is the most mind-shocking episode ever. I can't deal with this. These are too many mind shocks. Again, this was posted on the Making a Murderer subreddit. Pamela Sturm didn't just find the RAV4. She may have seen the real killer. I want to touch on what I found yesterday while piling through tons of research and link after link. So, former PI Pamela Sturm and her daughter Nicole Sturm volunteered to search the Avery salvage yard. Of course, relatives of Pagel. Pam and Nicole drove to the main office building where 2 men were talking outside, and it turned out Earl Avery was one of the men whom Pam asked permission if she could search the property, and he agreed that she could after some chit-chat about losing a nephew. Pam noticed a ridge up one side of the property and said she had to search over there. I mean, I guess this is the Pam of God moment. She walked up to that area, and up on the ridge is where she found Teresa Halbach's car buried under some branches, door frame, and the hood of another car. After finding the RAV4, they called Pagel and left a message. They had his direct line given to them by Ryan Hilligas, along with a camera that was borrowed to them by Teresa Halbach's roommate, Scott Blodorn. Very curious how all this happens, but anyway, they waited for the police to come to the salvage yard to check the RAV4. In the transcript for day 2 of the Wisconsin versus Avery court case, Pam Stern states that while she was waiting the 20 or so minutes that she and daughter Nicole waited by the car crusher, she states that she was in fear of safety since she found the RAV4 on the property, and she states that she pushed Nicole behind some vehicles because she saw a man standing on the hill above the ridge where the RAV4 was located. Behind the ridge where Pam found the RAV4 is the outskirts of the property and then the quarry. There are no cars beyond the ridge, just the hill and quarry. Here's a quote from the transcript. Kratz says, "Now tell us what happened." Pam says, "Well, we waited about 20 to 25 minutes before someone arrived. Before they arrived, we saw a man up on the ridge by the buildings up there. There is a ridge, and I got a little concerned, so I said I put Nikki behind a car so nothing would happen to her." Here's Buting's questioning. "And you mentioned a man on a ridge, or on the ridge, but up on the hill, kind of back towards the buildings where you were sitting there waiting for 20 minutes, correct? And Stephen Avery wasn't the man, was he?" Pam says, "I don't know for sure, it was too far to see." Buting says, "Well, who was this man? It wasn't Earl Avery, was it?" "I don't know. Like I said, it was too far." Interesting. Now, Stephen Avery was obviously at the cabin in Crivet, so it couldn't have been him. So this theory is quite bizarre if it was Martinez. That seems important since I recovered the fact that Earl Avery said that a man named Andre Martinez was on the property that day, and he would be on the property several times a month getting parts for his car, and according to him, several times a day sometimes. This Andre Martinez is the same Martinez whom later that day, November 5th, went to his ex-girlfriend's house and tried to axe her to death. Now, depending on the AM and the PM, that gets mixed up. Some people are stating this was, he went to the salvage yard in the AM, and then it was 1:30 PM when he hacked her to death. Or vice versa. I don't know if these are typos or not from the Daily Mail Online. He was successful in taking a hatchet from the pantry and hitting her in the back of the neck, causing a very huge, almost life-threatening gash to her neck and her arm. He also managed to axe the dog since it was trying to protect the woman, and he also managed to axe one or both of the children. They all managed to escape across the street to a tattoo place called the Cops, and Martinez is serving a 60-year sentence. And Martinez is out on a technicality? Huh. As of 5 years ago? Huh. Or not. Martinez had a history of sexual abuse, criminal burglary, bigger than all of the Avery brothers together, including Stephen Avery. He has spent most of his life in prison, and he was in the same prison as Brendan Dassey. And Andre Martinez was one of the several persons that the defense attorneys at Avery's trial wanted to present as a possible alternate person whom had motive to kill Teresa Halbach. The judge would not let the defense present possible other suspects. Yeah, that's not shady at all. So Martinez admits to spying on Teresa Halbach. So was he also there when they found the RAV4? Is this all circumstantial? I mean, every case is allowed one coincidence or anomaly. Once you start piling on dozens and dozens and dozens, of course, even the most clueless coincidence theorists maybe would bat an eye. Is it possible this is the coincidence in the case that a guy that just happens to hack his ex-girlfriend with an axe, attempted axe murder, just happened to be on the Avery salvage yard when the RAV4 was being found and happened to watch Pam of God Stern while she was finding it? I mean, this is all the Twilight Zone. I mean, wow, I really didn't think on episode 33 we would still be having this many mind shocks in this case. I mean, this is just absolutely bizarre. It's just absolutely bizarre. And his alibi is a 16-year-old going trick-or-treating with an adult. Okay. Oh, man. Okay. All right. So let's go back now. Some people, of course, think that Martinez himself might have rode Teresa Halbach off the road and then done something to her then. And then if he was, I don't know, a deranged loony, he might be curious as to what's going on in the Avery salvage yard if they think Avery did it, if he really did it. So, okay. Coming back now to the auto trader issues and the DCI. Again, there's so many mind shocks to go over. Of course, this is Mind Shock. It's very comprehensive. When we mention a guy like Martinez, we got to go deep because, again, this is Mind Shock. So back to the queso file. Martinez, the guy who struck his girlfriend with a hatchet, said Steven thought Teresa was spying on him and was coming to his house to pinpoint him for a crime he did not commit. Is that true? Now, again, let's not fall for these false dichotomies. Is it possible he did know Steven Avery and they did chit-chat a couple things and a couple things got mixed up? And there were, obviously, if Martinez has blackouts and he's a complete loony, we can't trust the information, but there might have been little snippets that Avery might have told him that maybe had some kind of kernels in truth. Did Avery really suspect Teresa Halbach of something? Or did he think she was shady? Or was she his drug dealer and he didn't trust her? So Jody's stepfather said his coworker told him there was more going on that was coming out and it involved Martinez. So from the report here, Sunday, November 6, 2005, approximately 9:07 a.m., Special Agent Neil J. McGrath met with Angela Shuster, the manager at Auto Trader Magazine. Special Agent Thomas J. Fassbender asked McGrath to contact Angela Shuster to obtain records from Auto Trader Magazine and discuss the disappearance of Teresa Marie Halbach, who is also employed as a photographer with Auto Trader Magazine. Shuster stated she had been with Auto Trader Magazine for approximately 8 years. Shuster has approximately 10 photographers working for Auto Trader Magazine. Each of these photographers covers a territory in Wisconsin and takes photos of vehicles to be displayed in the magazine. Shuster stated that her photographers did not typically meet and believes she is the only person with Auto Trader Magazine who had personally met Halbach when she hired her in Green Bay. The photographers handle most of their own business with the main office by phone, fax, and mail, and these photographers cover various areas in Wisconsin. Teresa Halbach had been employed with Auto Trader Magazine since October 8, 2004. Shuster is Halbach's supervisor and stated that Halbach was referred to her by a customer who needed a photo taken of a vehicle, and Shuster did not have a photographer in the area. The customer, whose name Shuster cannot recall, interesting, stated that he knew Halbach, and shortly after Halbach contacted Shuster about being hired with Auto Trader Magazine. Now, is this another anomaly, curiosity, coincidence of sorts that nobody can nail down any names? Because if this unnamed individual is somehow linked to DCI, does that explain it? And of course, they can't have that out in the open, so they have to not be able to recall his name. Shuster believed that Halbach lived in Hilbert, Wisconsin, and stated that Halbach normally worked Monday, Thursday, Saturday. Halbach covers the Green Bay, Appleton, and Calumet County areas. Halbach was temporarily covering Manitowoc and Sheboygan. However, these areas tend to generate less business in the winter months and would be covered less frequently by Halbach. So this is not normally her area. That's curious, considering she'd been out there so many times. I don't know, a lot of these curiosities, it's bizarre. It's really bizarre. Okay, so moving on here. Tuesday, January 30th, 2007, at 10:45 hours, investigator Baldwin and myself, Dietering, did interview the following individual at his residence, Eugene Barth in Manitowoc. Barth is the stepfather of Jody Stokowski, previously mentioned in this incident. Investigator Weigert had received a telephone call from Stokowski indicating her father may have some information regarding goings-on at Avery Auto Salvage area on October 31st, 2005. In speaking with Barth, he indicated a coworker named David Trice, currently incarcerated at Columbia Correctional Facility for operating while intoxicating charges, had told Barth some time ago a female Trice knows stated to him there was more to the story regarding the Halbach-Avery situation. Barth believes this involves the individual who struck his girlfriend in the face with a hatchet. According to Barth, Trice had talked about a female who had gone to the Averys for some reason, possibly to pick up parts for a vehicle, a friend, or some children. According to Barth, Trice had made the comment to him, they were out there and there was more going on that was coming out. Barth did advise us Trice was aware of the fact that Jody Stokowski was living with Stephen Avery at the time this discussion took place. Barth had nothing further to add to this investigation. Okay, let's go more into MINDSHOCK land here. Martinez stated he was friends with Stephen Avery. He also told us he would commonly go to the junkyard as often as a couple times a day. Martinez told us Stephen Avery told him, meaning Stephen Avery, thought Teresa Halbach was coming to his house to pinpoint him for a crime he did not commit. I asked Martinez if Stephen thought Teresa was spying on him, to which Martinez stated that is what Stephen told him he believed was happening. I asked Martinez if Stephen mentioned Teresa by name, to which Martinez stated Stephen did. Martinez also told us Stephen Avery told him Stephen said he wanted to dispose of her, meaning Teresa. Martinez also told us Stephen had showed him a little book, which had Teresa's phone number in it. Again, Martinez stated Stephen believed Teresa was spying on him for a crime he was innocent of. Martinez also told us Stephen would commonly mention a baggie Teresa had that he wanted to get. Martinez then stated he remembered on one occasion Stephen said he were up on a hill with a truck in the salvage yard. Martinez indicated Stephen had a camera with him, and Martinez and Stephen observed Teresa drive into the salvage area, and Stephen took his camera out and was taking pictures of Teresa as she drove in. Martinez also told us he remembers Stephen calling Teresa a little expletive. I asked Martinez when this would have happened, if it would have been before Teresa's death that he told her these things, or after, to which Martinez stated this would have been before Teresa's death and disappearance. Martinez told us he did not believe Stephen would tell anybody else because his brothers would have probably told the police. Martinez states Stephen and he got along very well and Stephen trusted him, and this is why he would tell him these things. I questioned Martinez about specific information. Stephen had told him about the death and or disappearance of Teresa Halbach. Martinez stated he did not want to talk about it. Martinez stated his son did not wish him to get involved in the case and he did not want to say any more about it. Martinez stated he was going to be in a meeting with his son this week and he would send us a letter indicated if he wished to speak with us anymore, referencing this case. Okay, I then provided Martinez with a business card and thanked him for his cooperation, at which time we left the interview room. Okay, a lot of bizarre things there from Martinez. And then, of course, we have this other possible DCI agent, Kathy, taking photos at the salvage yard as well. It's kind of weird. It's weird. What can you say? Okay, so let's go back to the original point here with Zipperer and Cuss Road. So in this theory, were Teresa Halbach, Carmen Bootwell, and Mark Lee Zipperer being pressured to act as confidential informants in a drug sting operation involving local sheriff's departments, Wisconsin DOJ, and the FBI and or DEA? So this is a post here to whom it may concern. If you want to find the killer, look into the connection between Kenneth Kratz and Ryan Hilligus. Look into the sexting scandal and the drug addiction. The fact that Ryan had access to drugs 24/7 should shed light on the subject. I can't say any more other than the corruption is deeper than a couple dirty cops. They were only doing what they were told. Anonymous post there. Here's Mark Lee Zipperer's obituary. Mark Lee Zipperer, 28, Green Bay, died unexpectedly Tuesday, November 29th, 2005, at his residence. Mark was born in Manitowoc, July 23rd, 77, to Daniel and Jane Hess Zipperer. He attended Holy Cross Grade School and graduated from the Mishicot High School with the class of 96. Mark was employed by Wilco Cabinet Company of Green Bay. He enjoyed skateboarding, snowboarding, camping, and bicycling. Mark also played guitar in a band. He's survived by these relatives. Mark is also survived by many cousins. Mark was preceded in death by his maternal grandparents, his paternal grandparents, Okay, and then just information on his funeral. Okay. Another post here from TikTok Manitowoc Reddit. I suspect Teresa Halbach made it home and was killed there, either accidentally or intentionally, or a drug overdose. I think Ryan Hilligus, Mike Halbach, and Scott Blodorn were in a secret drug business with Weigert, the queso drug investigator. When Weigert discovered that Teresa Halbach had seen Stephen Avery, he called Lank, and they planned to solve both departments' problems and be heroes by framing Stephen Avery. I think the Rav and Teresa Halbach's body, if it was a drug overdose, were moved to Xander Road and set on fire. Manitowoc Sheriff's Office had attempted to frame Stephen Avery for a stolen car fire there a few months before. So this Xander Road car incident is not really talked about much in relation to Stephen Avery, but would anybody be that surprised that Manitowoc is trying to frame Avery for yet another crime? All right, so let's look at the Making a Murderer subreddit. This is an interesting write-up here. Avery was questioned about burning a car to destroy evidence in 2004. There is no expletive way Avery would have left the Rav in the yard. In 2004, they questioned him about a Chevy Blazer that was found burned up. It seems they thought Avery burned cars back then. So, September 21st, 2004, dispatch received a call from a person stating that a vehicle is on fire in a field off of Stangl Road. At this time, dispatch dispatched Tish Mills Iyer DEPL to respond, or is that supposed to be department? Is that a typo? To respond to Stangl Road and Xander Road reference a vehicle car fire. A short time later, they were dispatched to the area. While responding, the Tish Mills Fire Department was requesting assistance was needed at the location. A short time later, I'm guessing this is the officer statement here. Officer arrived on location where the Tish Mills Fire Department had just put out a vehicle fire in the East Field area off of Stangl Road, just north of Xander Road. As I approached the vehicle, I did observe, I'm guessing this is a license plate reference, which came back to 1991 Chevy, black in color, to Barbara and Thomas Janda. What? So this vehicle belonged to Janda? The plot thickens. The vehicle was a S10 Blazer SUV in which the interior was fully gutted, all windows were smashed out. The vehicle was approximately 25 yards off the roadway and did not appear to have been the result of a traffic crash. Tish Mills Fire Department informed me that upon arriving on location, they did not view any persons in the vehicle, and while checking the area, they did not note anything in the field area to be suspicious. According to the Tish Mills Fire Department, it appeared that the vehicle was intentionally set on fire and some unknown type of accelerant was used to make the vehicle burn that fast and that hot. In a review of the area, I did not find any evidence. While on the scene of the vehicle fire, dispatch informed me that they received a call from Barbara Janda reporting that her vehicle with the same plate and description as being stolen. It should be noted the initial call of this reported fire came in at 21:21 hours, with the call of the vehicle being stolen coming in at 2137 hours. At this time, I did ask for a tow service to remove the vehicle from the area and transport it to Manitowoc Sheriff's Office impounded area. Dispatch stated that Avery's towing would be responding. I informed dispatch to cancel Avery's towing due to the vehicle ownership being from the same family. Oh, all of a sudden they know what conflict of interest is? So there's no problem with Manitowoc, who Avery has a $36 million lawsuit against, searching and finding evidence, or planting evidence, on his property, but they won't allow someone in the same family to tow a burned vehicle. Interesting. Interesting indeed. Dispatch then stated that Rabas would be responding to the location to provide towing service. During my investigation, I was informed by one of the fire department personnel that a Chris Kosapak was traveling through the area and might have seen what had transpired. At this time, I did ask for a second unit to respond to my location, in which Deputy Cummings did arrive shortly after. Deputy Cummings remained on location to provide assistance to the vehicle being removed from the area and to follow the vehicle to Manitowoc Sheriff's Office impound. Deputy Cummings did provide evidence control of the vehicle, where he did conduct a vehicle inventory of the vehicle. With Deputy Cummings on location, I then proceeded to attempt to make contact with Chris Konopaki. I was unable to speak with Konopaki at this time, but I did leave a message for her to contact this officer. I did speak with Chris Konopaki, who stated, so this is now on September 22nd, 2004. I did speak with Chris Konopaki, who stated at approximately 9 p.m. she left her residence on Rocky Court just north of the incident, where she was bringing home her sitter. She stated she did travel down Stangl Road and then onto Xander to the sitter's residence on STH 42. During this time, Konopaki stated she was traveling towards Xander, southbound on Stangl. She saw a vehicle facing northbound on Stangl Road with lights off and no one around. At this time, Konopaki stated her best description would be a dark-colored car, either blue or black, possible two-door older model. Konopaki stated this seemed a little suspicious, but did not want to stop due to her being frightened. She continued to drop off her sitter, and within 8 to 10 minutes later, she arrived back at this location, where she observed the car that was pulled alongside the roadway was gone, and that a vehicle in the field was fully engulfed in fire. At this time, I mean, there's a bunch of numbers here referencing other cases, I guess. Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office received an invoice from Rabas Garage for the towing of this 91 Chevy Blazer, black in color, which apparently had been burned in a field on Stangl Road near Xander Road. The amount of $150 will be satisfied by department and should be collected upon release of the vehicle. September 27, 2004, detective, this is a jumbled copy-paste job of these files and reports, followed up. The fire investigator had been called in the scene. Apparently no photos were taken of the scene or the vehicle that night. Is this classic Manitowoc investigation? No photos? Okay. Fire investigator Eric Hansen and I viewed the Janda vehicle at the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office impound garage. I obtained photos of the exterior and interior of the vehicle. I observed that there was very extensive damage to the interior of the vehicle. There was far less damage done to the engine area of the vehicle. It would appear that the fire did not originate in the engine area. There appeared to be more heat damage to the passenger side of the vehicle than to the driver's side. The lowest burn area seemed to be in the area on the floor directly behind the passenger side seat. The running board on the passenger side of the vehicle was completely burned through and destroyed, while the running board on the driver's side was still intact. The entire dashboard area and steering column had been completely destroyed by fire, and most of the remnants were laying on the floor of the vehicle. I did observe what appeared to be an AM/FM cassette player lying on the passenger floor of the vehicle. There appeared to be little or no personal property inside the vehicle at the time of the fire. I observed that the tires on the vehicle were damaged by the fire, but they did appear to have good tread, and they appeared to be newer tires. The spare tire was present on the back of the vehicle and also appeared to be in good condition prior to the fire. At this time, it doesn't appear as though any components had been stripped from the vehicle prior to the fire. It is unknown if any personal property was removed from the vehicle prior to the fire. At this time, we are unable to make a determination as to whether there were any keys in the vehicle at the time of the fire. The entire steering column and steering wheel had been destroyed by the fire, and remnants were laying on the floor of the vehicle. We chose not to sift through the debris or further tamper with the vehicle, since it was unknown whether or not the insurance company intended to conduct their own investigation and examination of the vehicle. I made contact with American Family Insurance, and all of these individuals verified that Barbara Janda had filed a claim. He advised that Barbara has had an insurance policy with them since 2001. He advised there have been no previous claims filed, and he was not aware of any recent changes to policy. Okay, the insurance adjuster reviewed the vehicle, proposed a settlement of $1,900. At this time, the check has not yet been issued to Barbara. Okay. September 30th, 2004. I viewed the scene of the fire, which was located in a field northeast of the intersection of Stangl and Zander. The field was mostly grass and weeds with some small pine trees planted in it. I located a burned circle in the field, 71 feet to the east of the edge of Stangl Road. It appeared as though the vehicle was driven into a field and parked at this location. The field access was located 300 feet to the north of the northern edge of Zander Road. The burned circle was approximately west and 18 feet wide from north to south. Obtained photos, conducted a search of the grass field. Okay, so this detective collected a soil sample from the center of the burned circle. Second control soil sample was collected 8 feet to the south of the first soil sample on the edge of the circle. These soil samples were secured in a temporary evidence locker at Manitowoc Sheriff's Office. Observed there were no residences in the immediate area that would have had a view of the entire scene. There was a woods something north and 8 large hill obstructed the view of the fire scene. Okay. I attempted to make contact with Barb Janda at Two Rivers, but found no one at home at this time. I made contact with Stephen Avery in the driveway outside of the residence Stephen lives. Stephen advised that he is Barbara's brother. Stephen was notified of the incident. Stephen stated Barbara often allowed him to use the 1991 Chevy Blazer, which was involved in the incident. Stephen stated he believes that he may have been the last person to use the vehicle before it was discovered missing. Now, would a guilty person say that? Stephen stated he believes he used the vehicle the day before it was discovered missing. However, he does not recall where he went with the vehicle. Stephen showed me the area where the vehicle was normally parked. He advised that the vehicle would have been parked next to the ice fishing shanty between the two residences. I asked Stephen if he had a key for the vehicle, and he indicated that he does. I asked him to verify that the key was still in his possession. Stephen removed a large key ring from his pocket, and he showed me a key which he positively identified as being the key for the Chevy Blazer. Again, are these the actions of a guilty man? To just come forward with all this, oh yeah, I have the key, I was probably the last person to use it. Or is this a guy is this a simple man who basically just admits the truth at every turn? Stephen stated that the only other key for the vehicle would be in Barbara's possession. And another interesting point here. This is not just a simple man. This is a simple man who was previously framed for the 1985 assault, who spent many years in jail, in prison, for this frame-up job. So he's been previously framed by the same department, and he's still being completely open and honest. And then, of course, in the 1982 cat incident, he was the only one punished for Yanda, no relation to Janda, being the one who physically picked up a cat and threw it in the fire, and yet Stephen Avery was the one punished for animal cruelty. I mean, it's really weird. If you and a bunch of drunk buddies are sitting around a fire, your drunk buddy lifts up someone and throws them in the fire, killing them. Let's say that's the situation. And then if he goes to the police station and admits to doing it, but says there were other people present, would he get punished? I mean, this is bizarre. You let the guy off the hook that actually did the deed. But the other individuals who may or may not have egged him on or participated in some capacity, they're punished, but the actual guy who did the deed is not punished. This is how Manitowoc County deals with Stephen Avery. I mean, it's all very, very bizarre. Stephen stated the only other key for the vehicle would be in Barbara's possession. He stated that he believes that Barbara has her key at this time. He stated that whoever took the vehicle would have had to have hotwired it since both sets of keys were accounted for. Stephen stated he and Barbara were the only ones who ever used the vehicle. He was not aware of any other family members ever using the vehicle. Again, are these the words of a guilty man? Would a guilty guy would say, oh yeah, maybe other people used it as well, to try to confound the issue, right? You wouldn't want to make it simple and cut and dry. If you're a responsible party, you would say, oh, sometimes we left the keys in it, nobody usually takes it, or things of that nature, right? I mean, people come and go. If he said people come and go on the property for parts all the time, no one ever steals anything, so we never thought we had to look out for that kind of stuff. Again, it's interesting to dissect how an innocent versus guilty person would behave, or simply say, yeah, it was a common vehicle used. Right? I mean, I don't know. It's really bizarre how every step of the way it seems like Stephen Avery is actually telling the truth and has nothing to hide. Stephen stated he was the primary driver of the vehicle and used it more frequently than Barbara did. Again, are these the words of a guilty man? He advised that Barbara owns 2 other vehicles, which he identified as a Chrysler van and a Porsche. Barbara's husband, Thomas Janda, owns a pickup truck. Stephen stated Barbara, Thomas, and their son Brian Dassey all work together, and they usually drive together to work each day. He advised that they normally do not return home until approximately 5:30 p.m. each night. I questioned Stephen about other vehicles that he owns. Stephen stated he owns a total of 5 vehicles, 1 blue Cadillac, 1 Suburban, 1 blue K5 Blazer, and 2 Monte Carlos, 1 blue, 1 brown. He advised that one of the Monte Carlos does not run, however the other 4 do run and are registered. Stephen stated he has insurance on all of his vehicles. He advised that he prefers the Blazer, and Barbara often drives his Suburban. Interesting. And if this is spelled correctly, this is Detective Weicker? Weicker. Asked Stephen if he had any idea who may have had a reason to take this vehicle and light it on fire. Stephen stated that he absolutely has no idea who may have been responsible for taking the vehicle. I asked Stephen if he had any problems with anyone in the past year since he was released from prison. Stephen stated he had absolutely no problems with anyone, and he could not think of any reason why anyone would want to damage the vehicle. Stephen stated he is not aware of anyone who would have grudges against Barbara or any other family members. Stephen claimed to have absolutely no idea who may have been responsible for taking the vehicle. I questioned Stephen as to his activities on the day the vehicle was taken. Stephen stated he does not recall exactly what he did on that day. He said he may have worked at Avery's Auto Salvage, but is not certain. Stephen stated he believes that he and his girlfriend, Jody Stikowski, left to go somewhere together in his Cadillac. However, he could not remember where they went or what they did. Stephen stated he is certain that they did not use the Chevy Blazer on this date. Stephen could not remember what time they returned home. He stated sometime after they returned home, Barbara came to his residence and told him that the Blazer was missing. After I confirmed that none of the family members knew where the Blazer was, Barbara decided, after they confirmed that none of the family members knew where the Blazer was, Barbara decided to call it into the police. Stephen stated Barbara then contacted Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office from his residence. Stephen does not know what time the vehicle would have been taken. He stated he does not recall seeing the Blazer at any time on Tuesday, September 21st, 2004. I questioned Stephen about any personal property that may have been kept in the vehicle. Stephen stated the vehicle was kept very clean and was not aware of any personal property that was kept in the vehicle. He advised that the vehicle would have had a factory-installed AM/FM radio. He was not aware of any other valuables that would have been in the vehicle. So I believe he's talking about Janda now. The day the vehicle was discovered missing, she was elsewhere all day. She stated she was feeling very sick on that day and she never left the trailer. Jody stated Stephen was gone throughout most of the day and she believes that he was likely working at Avery's Auto Salvage. Jody stated she believes that Stephen got home sometime after 3 o'clock. Jody stated in the late afternoon or early evenings, believes Stephen was outside working on something. She does not believe that he ever left the residence to go anywhere. She went to bed approximately 7:30 because she was feeling very sick. She stated she recalls hearing Stephen come in at the residence at approximately 8 o'clock. She stated she then fell asleep. Jody later recalls waking up and hearing Barbara's voice in the residence. She overheard Barbara and Stephen talking about the missing vehicle. She stated Barbara then called the police to report it missing. Jody stated the Blazer is normally kept parked next to the ice shanty between the residences. She was unable to see the vehicle from her residence since it would be obstructed by the garage. Jody does not recall seeing the Blazer at any time. She also cannot recall the last time she saw the vehicle on the property. Jody said she does not recall seeing or hearing anyone on the property throughout the day. So, interesting, right? So this is really bizarre. on how, I'm guessing it's just weird. They're interrogating Avery. Are they trying to pin this on Avery somehow? But if Avery did, let's go to the side of the guilters. If they believe Avery was responsible for randomly burning this car to get some kind of $1,900 insurance settlement or whatever, I mean, how much could he have sold the car for? I mean, he's got Teresa Halbach coming and taking pictures of vehicles all the time. It's rough. It's rough. Wouldn't they have gotten more money if the vehicle was stolen and not found burned? So what would be the purpose of burning it? Other people say that if the MO to get rid of evidence is taking cars elsewhere to burn them, why would Avery leave the Teresa's RAV4 on his own property? I mean, obviously that doesn't make any sense at all. But if Avery's a car burner, would it be effective to do the same thing with Teresa's RAV4 and just take it somewhere and burn it for all the evidence instead of leaving the evidence in it for people to find by just covering it with a couple of branches? I mean, again, doesn't make a lot of sense. So let me go back to the inspiringdad.com. He had a write-up on Xander Road. There has to be a link between Teresa Halbach's murder and Xander Road. There are way too many coincidences linking them together. This may be the place Teresa was murdered and cremated. This may be where Kathleen Zellner proves Teresa was killed and Stephen was never there because he was on the phone at his house during that supposed time. Yesterday, while going through logs of my blog, I came across a link that was being visited, a link I never created, even though it's automatically created. This link sends you directly to the picture of the Xander Road sign from Stephen Avery's trailer. This might be what Zellner was referencing when she tweeted check ADUHID. I think it's too coincidental that this kind of link never showed up on my blogs and disappeared. Redditor One Piece of Gum Left has their own feelings about Xander Road. I was reading the post by Sleuthing Hobbyist regarding a vile-smelling fire on November 1st. And this is, in the Queso report, Paul Metz reported a vile-smelling fire on November 1st that cows damaged fences in attempts to get away from. Paul Metz also called a nuclear power plant, which further gives credibility to his claims, as this would have been before Teresa Halbach was even known to be missing. This is on November 1st. Why wasn't this aspect ever mentioned or investigated further? I have to believe that if these people smelled a possible fire 4 miles away, there'd have to be many who potentially smelled it as well. I count at least 10 houses properties south of Metz's place. If you head south and question those 10 or so residences, you might get a better idea of how far south the source of smell had been, or even the source of the smell. The fact that we don't see any further investigation of this claim leads me to believe that the event happening on November 11th was simply not in line with their narrative. So maybe the most solid lead in terms of a body getting burned doesn't get investigated further because it wasn't on October 31st. So that's interesting. That's very interesting. Now, how many the coincidence stack is already a mile high. We have so many out of the normal occurrences around this time period. We have all these people dying of alleged drug overdoses. There's just so much to keep track of. It is mind-shocking beyond mind-shocking. And we have these constant mentions to Xander Road now, which I'll be continuing. So this is the host Sleuthing Hobbyist made. And back to the inspiringdads.com's blog post, I found another coincidence so unbelievable I felt it needed its own thread. As the other post states, there was a fire so vile, it spooked Paul Metz's cows to the point of breaking through fences. And again, how often does that happen? We need control. So is this a weekly thing, or has this never, ever happened before? I'm sure his livestock had to be used to normal smelling fires, as people in the area probably burned debris occasionally. As most of us have heard, a burning body is something quite different, foul, and distinct. The report of Paul Metz's interview is on pages 289, 294, and 295 of the Queso reports. It lists his home address in the reports, but that's not where his cattle are. His cattle are on land on Xander Road, just west of Jambo Creek Road. Here's the very weird coincidence. There was a for sale sign from Stephen Avery's Grand Am entered at trial. On the back was written an address on Xander Road along with Teresa Halbach's phone number. Huh. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting indeed? It didn't look like Stephen Avery's writing, and witnesses, law enforcement, were asked if the address meant anything to them. It seemed to me they were being asked because Stephen Avery didn't know why it was written on the back. Remember, countless law enforcement had access to Stephen Avery's property. Stephen Avery's Grand Am for Sale sign with Teresa Halbach's number and the location of her burned body would have been a tidy piece of evidence, don't you think? Until they devised a better and more airtight plan of planting cremated remains right on Stephen Avery's property for a stronger case. That also leads to the question, did they originally try to link this Janda car burning off of Xander Road to say that that was Avery's MO? He just dumps cars and or bodies on Xander Road? Huh, interesting. If you pull up the area on Google Maps where Xander Road meets Jambo Creek Road and drop a pin on the property next to Paul Metz's, it shows the address that's on the back of the for sale sign. Two other strange coincidences worth noting. The property directly south of Metz's farm land is owned by a Koenig, and there's a Jason Koenig with Manitowoc Sheriff's Office. And Metz's home address, not the land where his cows are, is on County Road B, directly north of George Zipper's. More very strange coincidences in this case. Redditor Apocalyptic Cynic added this what-if scenario. So what if, 1, the Xander Road address was a sudden hustle shot request while Teresa Halbach was in her car doing rounds that day, and she jotted it down on the sign quick because it was laying there on the passenger seat. She gives Stephen Avery the sign, perhaps on accident, as she does with all her customers. 3, leaves the Stephen Avery property and goes to the Xander Road site. 4, mystery person does the deed there. 5, Coburn investigates Stephen Avery and does a walkthrough of his place after Teresa Halbach reported missing. 6, sees the sign with address on it and checks it out afterwards. 7, finds the RAV, calls in the plates, and also finds the burn site. 8, realizes there's no way to make the crime stick given the burn site. 9, realizes after conferring with other law enforcement in the depositions that, hey, since Stephen Avery was presumably last to see Teresa Halbach, this set of circumstances is too good to pass up. I mean, we know he's guilty because he got off once before because the bogus DNA evidence contradicted our stellar investigation in 1985. So let's not take any chances this time around and help this along to the rightful conclusion. And plus, we can probably save $36 million in the process. Everything falls into place when it comes to Xander Road. There are way too many coincidences. It's even a little freaky if you think about it. What are your thoughts on Xander Road? So is Xander Road similar to Cuss Road in all of this insanity? And again, this is without even getting into the CI situations, the DCI situations, and agents that may or may not have been involved in Auto Trader and Teresa Halbach, which may or may not have been involved in that. All unknown. So let's go all the way back to these drug overdose situations and these links. So the back to the TikTok Manitowoc Reddit and this post here regarding Weigert and Lank. So I'll start it again. I suspect Teresa Halbach made it home and was killed there accidentally or intentionally, or a drug overdose. I think Ryan Hilligus, Mike Halbach, and Scott Blodorn were in a secret drug business with Mark Weigert, queso drug investigator, and they called him for help instead of 911 because an investigation at the house would get them all in trouble. When Weigert discovered that Teresa Halbach had seen Stephen Avery via her phone or paperwork, he called Lank, and they planned to solve both departments' problems and be heroes by framing Stephen Avery. I think the RAV and Teresa Halbach's body, if it was a drug overdose, were moved to Xander Road and set on fire. Manitowoc Sheriff's Office had attempted to frame Stephen Avery for a stolen car fire there a few months before. Andy Coburn was sent to plant the Xander Road sign, the folded plates, and panties and to find the RAV and call it in, causing it to be entered into evidence. But they discovered the recorded jail calls with Jody, and the crime scene had to be moved to Avery's salvage yard. At this point, I think Kratz had gotten involved and made himself the boss, orchestrating the rest of the planting like a trial checklist, with little thought to how it would be found. And just another point here, a lot of these clueless coincidence theorists, when dismissing so-called conspiracies or more than one perpetrator, they, for whatever reason, cannot fathom that conspiracies don't always go off without a hitch. So when something doesn't make sense to their small, feeble minds, they just have this hallucination that if there was any conspiracy ever carried out, it would have to have been carried out flawlessly, as if plans can't change, as if things can't be botched and had to be changed last second in somewhat downright stupid ways because of unexpected road bumps. Murphy's Law. This really isn't that hard to understand. I think small children can understand that sometimes things go wrong and you have to improvise or go to some kind of plan B, plan C that might not actually be logical or even appear logical, but in the heat of the moment, you have to deviate from the original plan for whatever reason, and then we end up with what we get, which is this really sloppy botch job, which wasn't really intended as such. But that's the way it ended up. Same thing in the Maura Murray case. Same thing in some of these other cases. Just because something isn't carried out flawlessly and doesn't appear to make sense, that doesn't mean there wasn't a conspiracy of sorts. So continuing on here, it wouldn't surprise me if the RAV in Avery salvage yard is a not quite duplicate. A burned car couldn't be hidden there, and the blood in the back of it is not Teresa Halbach's. That's why it wasn't opened at Avery salvage yard and was covered and moved in the dark. I think Ryan Hillegas got scratched with branches while covering it up in the dark while getting instructions from law enforcement via his phone and the flyover video. Teresa Halbach's keys had either been burned or wouldn't fit the duplicate RAV, so a replacement was made attached to the fob she'd never used and planted at Stephen Avery's. Bullets found around the garage were rubbed with the DNA and planted later, after the floor was dusty from jackhammering. The voicemails were switched. Zipper audio was put onto the Janda video. Zipper was the one with the incomplete address. No wonder the CD is, quote, lost now. I doubt the bones planted in Stephen Avery's burn pit with Teresa Halbach's, and there was clearly no giant fire there, especially involving tires. I think that Teresa Halbach DNA is from the personal items collected at her home and brought to Avery salvage yard. I think the Stephen Avery DNA is swabbed from his sink, the extra stolen groin swabs, sweat and touch, and dripped from a non-EDTA vial that Lank stole from the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office evidence lockup. A standard blood draw includes 10 tubes of different colors with different additives. The search of Avery salvage yard, instigated by Ryan Hillegas, untrained law enforcement, was put off until the duplicate RAV was in place. Pam of God was set up to find it, but was confused because it was a different color than she was expecting, and the VIN had been tampered with. I think Ken Kratz wrote the Loopy K's Sakaiki letter, ordered the planting of items in the Janda burn barrel, faked computer searches, and quarry bones, so to trick Scott Tadeusz, Barb Janda, and Bobby Dassey, and Joshua Redaunt into changing their stories to include a big fire by claiming that Stephen Avery was guilty and trying to frame them. If they didn't comply, they'd be charged as accomplices. That's why Barb Janda was so wishy-washy and Scott Tadeusz was so ecstatic when Stephen Avery was convicted. Brendan was too confused to cooperate, and they had to knead it out of him. They hoped Stephen Avery would confess to save his young disabled nephew. At a minimum, I think these people were knowingly involved in the cover-up. Ryan Hillegas, Mike Halbach, Scott Blodorn, Mark Weigert, Lank, Andy Coburn, Ken Kratz, Tom Fallon, Sherry Culhane, and Remaker, all of them would benefit from Stephen Avery being convicted or from allowing themselves to be blackmailed. At least one of them has been talking to Kathleen Zellner. Nobody ever dreamed that this case would have a worldwide audience. The mere suggestion of filmmakers having access to the courtroom and family made Kratz apoplectic and desperate to get their footage seized, and the project tied up in legal red tape more than once. He's now desperate to sway public opinion and points often to the contents of the documentary series, not the transcripts and evidence. I could be wrong about some or all of this, but all of the evidence fits with a similar scenario. How Mark Weigert knew the Barb Janda appointment was Stephen Avery on November 3rd without having received that info from Singular. Why unemployed nursing graduate was making frequent deliveries to construction worker Scott Blodorn. How Mike Halbach knew to grieve for Teresa Halbach before her car was found. Why Ryan Hilligus and Mike Halbach were acting so squirrely about being on Avery Salvage Yard. Why Ryan Hilligus was working so closely with law enforcement and deemed untrained law enforcement and allowed on crime scene. He was probably familiar to Queso as a drug informant. Why Ryan Hilligus, Mike Halbach, and Scott Blodorn were not investigated. And that is curious. Again, when a female goes missing or is met with foul play, it's usually the significant other, boyfriend, ex-boyfriend. Ryan's scratches, murder and or planning the car, only one of 10 colored tubes in unsealed evidence box, totally ignored as crucial evidence the Xander road sign, the Sakaiki letter, computer searches, quarry bones, large amounts of blood in the back of Rav, missing parts, damage, and VIN tampering to Rav, all used for blackmailing witnesses not helpful against Stephen Avery. Kratz's email to Culhane that Weigert was checking the 1985 blood, what it was, likely the preservative. Zero tire residue plus unburned leaves and grass around the burn pit. Shock and horror. What could be more shocking than Teresa Halbach's closest friends and brother and corrupt law enforcement working to get two innocent men convicted of a crime by using his closest friends and family against him? And this was written by Mr. Precedent at TikTok Manitowoc. Is this the best theory as of yet on what happened to Teresa Halbach and how the investigation was so bizarre? He also wrote this: I suspect Ryan Hilligus, Mike Halbach, and Scott Blodorn were in a secret drug business with Mark Weigert and probably Ken Kratz, a known drug addict. That could explain why an unemployed nurse was dropping stuff off to a construction worker a few times a week, why law enforcement referred to Ryan Hilligus by a different but similar name, and why no law enforcement thought it was odd that the untrained law enforcement ex-boyfriend of the victim was allowed to wander around a crime scene while the coroner was banned due to conflict of interest. You can't make this stuff up. The missing person's ex-boyfriend is allowed to wander the crime scene to his leisure while the coroner is banned. It explains why Mike Halbach was grieving before his sister's car was found and why Ryan Hilligus butted in to make sure Mike Halbach didn't answer the reporter's questions incorrectly. I think Teresa Halbach died of a drug-related accident or crime. Maybe she OD'd or threatened to expose their crimes. Keep in mind, Scott Blodorn is her roommate, who is the friend of her ex, Ryan Hilligus. And they called Mark Weigert directly instead of 911 for help because a reported drug-related death or murder would get them all in trouble. According to the Singular rep's testimony, he couldn't have numbers for calls. I think they broke into Teresa Halbach's account to try to get her information so they'd have an explanation for how Mark Weigert, knew on November 3rd that Teresa Halbach had talked to Stephen Avery, but it wasn't there. Ryan Hilligus' phone calls were inquiries as to why they couldn't print out the info they needed. and the fake list was made to hide the fact that it wasn't available. They had either Teresa Halbach, her phone, or her completed paperwork between October 31st and November 3rd. Weigert's statement that a reverse search of Barb Janda's number led to Stephen Avery when we know it could not have is the first provable lie in the case. He lied because he was involved in the framing from the very beginning. For the record, I think Teresa Halbach made it home and died there, either by accident or attack. I suspect Ryan Hilligus, Mike Halbach, and Scott Blodorn were involved in a secret drug business with Mark Weigert. And they called him instead of 911 because a drug-related death would get them all in trouble. When he learned Teresa Halbach had visited Stephen Avery via her paperwork, phone, or stories told by Ryan Hilligus, Mike Halbach, and Scott Blodorn, he knew they could solve two problems at once. He called Lenk and they decided to frame Stephen Avery. The original crime scene was supposed to be Xander Road, where there was an attempt by Manitowoc Sheriff's Office to frame Stephen Avery several months prior, but when they learned about the recorded jail calls with Jody, they had to move everything to Avery Salvage Yard. All of the evidence, lies, and strange behavior fit into this scenario or one very similar to it. If Mark Weigert was involved in a secret drug business involving seized or controlled substances, he would benefit by not having to explain how his cohorts were involved in a drug-related death. I'm sure being heralded as a hero who cracked the case within minutes of the phone call and put Stephen Avery away doesn't hurt either. And some responses here, that's assuming a drug connection, and you may as well say the same about Remaker. He was the drug investigator from Manitowoc. Except, of course, Remaker was not co-leader of the investigation. Mr. President responds, Remaker was likely involved too. He and Weigert had a couple of very interesting phone calls about the plan. And he commented that the source of the tightly controlled drugs that killed Carmen Bootwell were untraceable. Perhaps Remaker is one of the people who has spilled the beans to Kathleen Zellner. It all could have started as a cleanup for a secret operation that went awry. I do think Kratz took over the orchestration of the planting once the crime scene was moved. That's why the evidence reads like a checklist of what would be needed at trial with so little thought put into how it was found or treated. Another response here, it would explain the missing screws for the RAV4 dashboard. It would explain the possible Martinez connection to Avery Salvage Yard, the comments about a baggie, Queso page 980. It would explain the statements made by Jody's stepfather, Queso page 1052. It would explain how Teresa knew on October 30th when chatting with Harriet on Yahoo that she would be in the area of Avery Salvage Yard the next day, October 31st. And Harriet, so this is Queso page 291, Harriet, apparently Mark Harriet contacted John Dietering the week of November 13th, 2005, indicated he had possibly been online with Teresa Halbach the night before she had disappeared, and further indicated she had mentioned going to the Avery property. Harriet indicated the day before Teresa Halbach went missing, he was in an online chat, members.yahoo.com, with someone who he believed to be Teresa Halbach. He was unsure of the date, but stated it was for certain the day before she went missing. Unless would it have been after? He stated he had tried to contact her via Yahoo on one previous occasion. He stated that he had looked up her profile on members.yahoo.com and searched by location. He stated he found her information along with a photo online. Harriet stated that he had done the chat with her the day before she went missing in Wisconsin chat room. He stated Teresa mentioned she enjoyed photography, and this is one of the items he used when he queried the members.yahoo.com and located her profile. Harriet stated the day before she went missing, he was in a Wisconsin chat room and saw her screen name being active on the chat online. He stated he tried to text message her. Harriet stated he saw in her profile that she was from the Green Bay area. He text messaged her and asked her if she was interested in meeting new people on the internet. He stated they chatted about photography, the outdoors, and other things. Harriet stated the person he was chatting with, who he believed to be Teresa, mentioned seeing Stephen Avery in file footage run on television regarding his multi-million-dollar lawsuit. She indicated she had been to Stephen Avery several times before taking photos. According to Harriet, the person he was chatting with stated that friends of hers told her not to hang around Avery's, but she thought Stephen was a nice guy. The individuals Harriet was text messaging with also mentioned she enjoyed taking photos of the old cars, which he believed to be classics, that Stephen had in the area. Harriet stated the night they chatted online, the person he was chatting with indicated she was going to Avery's tomorrow. So this was apparently between 9:30 and 10 p.m. for approximately 45 minutes. Harriet indicated the person who he was chatting with stated she would be online the next day at approximately 8 p.m. He stated he checked the chat rooms and did not see that subject's profile or screen name listed. He indicated the person he was chatting with specifically mentioned the fact that she worked with Auto Trader magazine. There was no mention of when the appointment with Stephen Avery was actually scheduled. The person Harriet was chatting with online indicated she was recently single, and Harriet felt this meant she had recently ended a relationship. Harriet stated he had his 2-year-old son the weekend before Halloween and described that weekend as being a cold weekend. He stated that he and his son stayed around the apartment complex, swimming in the pool, etc. Harriet stated he was not sure if he had his son the weekend of November 4th to November 5th. He indicated he goes into chat rooms every couple of days. There was no mention of whether the person he was chatting with preferred wet film to digital photography equipment. Investigation continues. Another post by Mr. Precedent here. I think Ryan Hilligus and Mark Weigert had something going on that made it necessary to frame Stephen Avery to protect both of them. Probably drugs. I think the 22 calls between Ryan Hilligus and law enforcement on the night the RAV was planted show it was a coordinated effort. Another post here by Mr. Precedent. I think, just a hunch that may be wrong, that Ryan Hilligus, Mike Halbach, and Scott Blodorn were involved in selling drugs confiscated by Calumet drug investigator Weigert, possibly Kratz also, and that Teresa Halbach died at home in the presence of Ryan Hilligus, Mike Halbach, and Scott Blodorn of an overdose or injury that would have gotten them all in serious trouble if a coroner learned that she died at home and did an autopsy. They called Weigert for help and got the idea to call Lank, frame Stephen Avery, solve 2 big problems, and win some big awards and brownie points. I think Weigert is deeply involved in the framing and probably is the orchestrator of it until Sweaty Ken Kratz took over. I think Ryan Hilligus was dropping off drugs to Scott Blodorn a few times a week, and Teresa Halbach either overdosed and died or threatened to expose a secret drug business with queso and was murdered. She could also have been making deliveries, but I think Ryan Hilligus, Mike Halbach, and Scott Blodorn definitely had a personal reason to help law enforcement frame Stephen Avery, and Bobby Dassey and Scott Tadiaicha all got blackmailed into helping. And back to the other Teresa Halbach sightings here, there was the witness who saw Teresa Halbach taking pictures of a cow on the morning of November 11th. The tipster thought maybe Teresa had spent the night in the area before she spotted her traveling south of Whitelaw the morning of Tuesday, November 1st. Was Teresa coming from Cuss Road and heading to a photo shoot, perhaps Steve Schmitz's home? Or was she coming from Schmitz's and heading north towards Cuss Road? Her phone still was off network at this point. The first incoming call to her phone since Stephen Avery's incoming call at 4:35 p.m. on October 31st was at 9:49 a.m. on November 1st. Interesting. And of course, Weigert was the one that handled this sighting. How did he handle it? And then, of course, I went over this. This was really shady. November 5th, 10:40 a.m. Baldwin was requested by Weigert to follow up on this info on the sighting. And then as soon as he arrived, Weigert informs him they located Avery's vehicle on the Avery property, and I guess they no longer care about this sighting. It's really bizarre. Really, really bizarre. Weigert was also the one who dismissed Leo Richmond's sighting on November 5th about Teresa at his door, looking for a home in the area at 11:30 p.m. So are these too many coincidences to keep track of now? I mean, we're in the stratosphere with coincidences. And Weigert is the one dismissing all of this information that doesn't fit the narrative. Really, really weird. Now, if that really was... See, what's weird, how long was Halbach alive? And what was going on? Because if she wasn't being held captive and panicked on November 5th, like, what's really going on? Because if she's normal but looking for a home in the area, relatives of DCI agents and such on Cuss Road, is everything fine until then, so to speak? Or not? Was she laying low and then something happened and then she couldn't lay low anymore? But when we look at Making a Murderer Season 2, there's some images of Cuss Road with a bunch of black Suburbans. So is this DOJ, FBI vehicles? So if the crime scene was going on November 4th and 5th, what was going on? Was there a tip that has not been made public on what exactly happened on Cuss Road? And apparently the DOJ files regarding everything happening at Cuss Road are sealed. So why are they sealed, and do the answers lie there? Was there a different frame-up job or completely different crime scene that has nothing to do with Avery going on with these other agents, and then the lid gets put on that? So the DOJ portable crime lab was at Cuss Road. So, and of course, that could have processed the RAV4 without having it needed to be towed to the crime lab. And the trained techs were all there with the DOJ crime lab at Cuss Road. Another poster posted this: my theory, at Cuss Road, the DOJ or FBI were set up there during the flyover video, which means they were already investigating something else there. Maybe they were tipped off to a dead body being buried there or something of sorts, but you have a very interesting theory, for sure. Sounds logical. A professional photographer doing Auto Trader would starve to death on what they get paid, and the fact that anybody could take pictures for Auto Trader. I wish there was some way to date the pictures of Cuss Road. Even the pilot says something to Jerry Pagel when they fly over Cuss Road in the plane. The crappy flyover footage was edited to not show things for sure. But why would the cops try to hide the RAV4 when it should be there? Or maybe it's not under the tarp. Another response here: exactly, when you see the big black Suburbans at a crime, it usually involves a crime the federal authorities are interested in. Gangs, drugs, human trafficking. Most of the time they are out of the regional or state office of the FBI to see if they have jurisdiction over the scene. If Teresa Halbach was working undercover, her missing and a burial site found, the feds would be all over that. It is a red flag that something serious happened. Another response here: back in the time frame of early 2000 to 2005, the country was being hit with rural operations of meth production using old barns in rural areas where the odor of cooking wouldn't be detected by neighbors. It spurred the successful Breaking Bad TV series. There has been some conclusive proof that the photographer prior to Teresa Halbach at Auto Trader was working undercover for the Wisconsin Department of Justice. Drug trade funds from the federal government often require joint task forces with local agencies. I think we're all going to find, when the case is solved by Kathleen Zellner, that Teresa Halbach was the new operative working the Manitowoc County, Calumet County area up to Green Bay, working undercover out of Auto Trader. The videos she makes about death could very well been about the knowledge working undercover. If you get exposed, you will die a horrible death. Now, that does indeed point to a new meaning to that video, because that is kind of a random video. That's quite mind-shocking. But continuing the post here, I now believe Scott Tadiach, Bobby Dassey, and M.O., who are M.O.'s initials, intercepted her on Highway 147, tortured her down on Cuss Road, and when done, buried her body temporarily until they figured out a way to dispose of her permanently, thus the dog hits of a corpse at Cuss Road. They did a bad job hiding her SUV near Scott Tediachi's trailer on Highway 147, and it was seen by the truck driver, thus allowing Andy Coburn to find it and put a new battery from the MC garage into it. And with the help of the sheriff and Lank, and then Mark Weigert and Fassbender, framed Stephen Avery to make the lawsuit go away. Scott Tediach, most likely using the burn barrel and his company's smelter, disposed of most of Teresa Halbach. The Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office had Carmen Boutwell available for planting some bones in Stephen Avery's fire pit. It's why no perfect match of DNA. It's not because of burning, but her being a cousin. Scott Tediach and Bobby Dassey alibi each other with the help of Barb. They are able to buy the new house because of the drug trade. The local cops continue taking their bribes to say nothing about their meth operation. Thus, Mark Weigert and Barb remain friends all these years. Stephen Avery is hated by Scott Tediach because he was interfering, being around so much with his meth operation. Thus, why Scott Tediach says it's the best thing that ever happened when Stephen Avery was sent back to jail. Making a Murderer 2 and all the scenes with Barb started my head thinking, God, she looks like a meth head, a tweaker, then it all fell into place. The other thing that we can't forget is that an FBI agent actually came to Wilmer Seibert's door shortly after Halbach went missing and showed him a picture of Halbach and asked if he knew her, which he didn't. And now we actually have FBI agents on location. So to all of the cognitive dissonant coincidence theorists who think this is also far-fetched, I mean, we have all of these black SUVs on location at Cuss Road. We have actual FBI agents walking around asking about Halbach. It's so insane how all of these little pieces of evidence are already there. There's no reaching. There's no far-fetched. It's already established. Now, what it means is unknown, but is this really out of the realm of possibility? And of course, Siebert is the guy that saw the white Jeep. Coburn apparently had one as well, and he saw these vehicles that may have been planning the RAV4. So, November 3rd, here's another post on TikTok Manitowoc. 1 dead, 1 missing, 2 framed. November 3rd, 2005 was a seemingly busy day for Manitowoc and surrounding areas. 1, Carmen Boutwell found of a suspicious drug overdose that morning, approximately 8:30 a.m. 2, Teresa Halbach reported missing later that day at 5 p.m. 3, Stephen Avery shows on the Global Subject Activity Report summary as homicide suspect at 6:34 p.m. Can these 3 events be connected? It certainly looks as though they can. There was also a warrant issued for Carmen Boutwell's arrest October 10th, 2005. And this is actually very curious. So, Carmen Boutwell met with law enforcement days prior to her death. Her grandmother drove her to an out-of-the-place location where Carmen Boutwell sat in the back seat of a law enforcement vehicle, refusing to tell them what they wanted to hear. She was nervous and anxious about this meeting. October 31st, 2005, on the day of October 31st, her family tells me that she was attending school and prep to attend college and had come home for lunch that day and spoke to her mom about what she was doing for Halloween. Carmen loved Halloween and she loved shelling out candy to the local kids. She told her mom that she was staying home that night and would look forward to her mom stopping by with her little brother in costume. Unfortunately, she never spoke with her again and did not make it over that night to see her. On the day of Halloween, Teresa Halbach is working her Monday at Auto Trader and has an appointment at the salvage yard with Stephen Avery to take photos of his sister's van. November 3rd, 2005, approximately 8:30 a.m., Carmen Bootwell's grandmother had gone upstairs and knocked on the door to wake Carmen Bootwell. She did not answer. So Carmen Bootwell had an apartment in the upstairs of her grandmother's home. The grandmother lived downstairs. A few minutes later, an unknown female alerted Carmen Bootwell's grandmother that Carmen Bootwell might be dead. The grandmother went upstairs where she found Carmen Bootwell sitting on the floor, leaning against the stereo and unresponsive. This is kind of weird. An unknown female alerted the grandmother. There's always these unknown individuals circling these shady, suspicious deaths, aren't there? Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department was contacted and responded. Conversations between Manitowoc County and Carmen Bootwell's family immediately ensued, and her family was told she had OD'd. So this was before any kind of autopsy or anything? Very, very weird. So the autopsy was on November 4th, the funeral on the 8th. But apparently I don't know what's going on here. Huh. So her family remembers placing her in the back of the hearse shortly after 1 p.m. on November 8th. Then she was taken to be cremated, but for some reason it took 3 weeks for her remains to be returned to the family. Carmen Bootwell's family questioned her death a few times to law enforcement and were told she was a drug addict and to get over it, and that finding her killer was virtually impossible. Law enforcement never investigated Carmen Bootwell's suspicious drug death. However, Manitowoc County stated in the news article that the case was still open. So Manitowoc County removed the coroner that was not allowed on Stephen Avery's property. So technically they had no coroner. So Bootwell was driven 2 hours to Waukesha County Morgue. Her autopsy was done by Deborah Kakash. Oh man, this is just, this is crazy. The autopsy stated her organs were normal, along with low numbers for methadone and alcohol. What is questionable is the mention of markings and their location, that she was more apt to have died from suffocation strangulation rather than an OD. During the autopsy, tissue and samples were taken and stored, and there was also a DNA card made for her. The coroner, Deborah Kakash, had contacted Carmen Bootwell's family daily, always saying how sorry she was. Her last day calling, she called 3 times, with the last conversation being that she was removed from the case and she stopped calling the family. And her funeral, of course, just happens to be the day supposed bones are found on the Avery salvage yard. So I'm going to close this out with an interesting article from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, February 5th, 2015. Federal agencies' payments to confidential informants increase. Federal programs that pay people to tell on others awarded around $500 million during 2014. The bulk of the disclosed awards went to whistleblowers. Their more shadowy cousins, confidential informants, got tens of millions, including $28.8 million in payments from a single Department of Justice fund, according to a report sent to Congress on January 29th. The informant payments came out of the asset forfeiture program, which last year received $4.47 billion through the seizure of proceeds or tools of crimes. The award payments provide a tremendous incentive to individuals to assist in investigations of drug traffickers that result in the seizure and forfeiture of drug-related assets. According to an Obama administration budget statement, the program also helped the FBI to fight criminal schemes in white-collar crime, organized crime, and narcotics trafficking, the administration contends. Federal law enforcement depends on thousands of informants to help with criminal cases, but a review of 154 recent federal acquittals nationally found that 1 in 6 involved informant problems. Informants whose work led directly to seizures got $16.8 million from the program, while $12 million went to resources whose work didn't lead directly to criminal assets. A total of $28.8 million continued a steady upward trend from $22.4 million 5 years earlier. Defense attorneys sometimes argue that tying informant pay to seizures perverts the process. Now informants are being paid on a percentage basis, and the work is now more profit-driven than it is driven for the sake of uncovering criminal conduct, said downtown-based defense attorney Mark Sindler, who has defended several clients accused by federal informants. That's morally problematic. Last month, Attorney General Eric Holder barred most use of the federal forfeiture process by local law enforcement agencies. He didn't curb the power of federal agencies to seize assets of suspected criminals. Last year, the DEA paid informants $20.9 million from their forfeiture program. The FBI paid informants $7.2 million, with other agencies making up the rest. Experts said those totals reflect just a fraction of the agency's payments to informants. I have seen so much game playing with funding and stats during my career that I simply cannot accept these stats on face value, said Michael Levine, a DEA undercover agent for 25 years, who is now a court expert on drug stings and has written 2 books on the case. Each case is different, and when it involves large award cases, the ability to take money from different, sometimes secret funding is limitless. The DEA's policies for using informants are different from those recommended by its parent agency, the Department of Justice. So that's really interesting. So there's definitely a lot of informants out there making a lot of money, so perhaps it's more viable. It's more lucrative than others think, and with the right connections. So Teresa Halbach just happened to fill the shoes of a previous undercover agent of sorts. I mean, this is all really, really bizarre. The coincidence stack is a mile high now. It's just very, very difficult to write it all off without being just downright silly and completely clueless. Because what are the chances that all of this is all coincidence? How clueless of a guilter does one have to be to just pretend none of these anomalies and coincidences have anything to do with the investigation? It's really, really bizarre. And there's plenty more to come in the Stephen Avery series. Believe it or not, we still episode 33 with so much more left to go over. Hope you guys enjoyed another edition of the MINDSHOCK podcast in the Stephen Avery series. If you appreciate the podcast, please donate to our PayPal. Help support the channel. Help us get more episodes out there in more cases to get truth and justice to triumph over all of the corruption and wrongful convictions going on out there. Subscribe to the channel. Make sure you enable notifications. You can just go to youtube.com/MindShock or youtube.com/MindShockTrueCrime to see the latest podcasts as they are released and manually peruse our ever-expanding back catalog. Like this podcast, share it across social media platforms, of which you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic logical analysis, co-podcast, or requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.